Good day all, RobotnikHolmes here, and this is a compilation video of the first 4 Sonic games chronologically. Thank you for being here and supporting me and watching my videos. I never thought I could continue making these about things I love, and it's always a joy creating these because I know that others enjoy them too. I've met other friends through my videos who enjoy Sonic too because I don't have that many people to talk about this kind of stuff with, and it always brightens my day when I read comments from fellow Sonic fans. So here's to a good new year, and enjoy the video. Sonic the Hedgehog, a franchise that's near and dear to my heart. Ever since I was a young lad, I would play these games so frequently that my freaking fingers would go numb. Whether it was the Genesis/Mega Drive era of 2D platforming, the vintage polygons of the 6th generation of consoles, or the intense boost gameplay popularised around the 2010s, if I saw that grinning blue mug, and more often than not, I always know I'm in for a good time. But right now, I'm going too fast. Those times can wait, however, because right now I'm starting from the beginning, way back in, I'd like to say the year 2000? This, unfortunately, wasn't the first Sonic game a young Holmes would play, and that honour would go to Sonic 3, but if memory serves me correct, I first saw it in a combo cartridge with 2 other SEGA games. One was Streets of Rage, a side-scrolling beat-em-up where you sock dudes in the face to the best techno tunes the hardware could allow. I always played as the girl. Another was Revenge of Shinobi, a hack-and-slash homage to the ninja genre that had you utilise different weapons in unkind terrain, a concept baby me was so confused by I could only reach the 2nd stage. And the third was Sonic the Hedgehog, a bright and cheery, yet equally frustrating 2D platformer with addictively fast gameplay and catchy as heck music. You controlled an angry blue rat and ran to the ride through colourful landscapes, busting up goofy robots until you confront their creator in one-on-one confrontations at the end of each level. This was my jam. I think at the time I was spoiled a little bit by the sequels and their improved graphics and inclusion of other characters and gameplay types, but I would always return to the Hedgehog's game of origin and relive the nostalgia and feelings I experienced as a kid playing that magical cartridge, at least until the city and their annoying collision boxes. If you're a fan of my comic reviews, first off, hi there. Second, this video might be a little more informative than my usual format, so just a heads up. As the first in a series, I'll be going into detail on the first Sonic game's history, gameplay, and story, as well as my thoughts on the game's graphics and general feel. Yep, we're getting all introspective here. For this video, I'm using footage from the 2023 re-release in Sonic Origins, but I'll make sure to show the original and any previous ports over the years. Old iterations deserve love too. Now to start analysing every single aspect and narrate in depth its history and development cycle. Buckle up, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between, because this is how the first Sonic game came to be. It's important to note that in the late 1980s, SEGA wasn't in the most favourable position as a games company. Their biggest competitor, Nintendo, were ranking in the big bucks with flagship video titles such as Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Donkey Kong, Metroid and Kid Icarus. Their games console at the time, the SEGA Mega Drive, wasn't the success that they were hoping for, both in Japan and overseas. This was despite it being technically superior to the Nintendo Entertainment System, which had swept most of the gaming landscape, excluding Europe. Their arcade ports weren't selling too well, although Flicky, a quaint bird-guiding game set to a cheerful catchy tune, was generally well received. And their mascot at the time, a little dude named Alex Kidd, wasn't quite as marketable a character as they initially believed, a sour reputation that would unfortunately follow the icon even a decade later. So they hit rock bottom. What the heck they gonna do? Eventually, everyone at SEGA would have to put their heads together and come up with something that could blow everyone's socks off. SEGA of Japan even got everyone in the competitive spirit and began an in-house competition, all to create the perfect flagship character that could stand his ground and totally own the Nintendo-dominated gaming market. They had to step up their game and, well, make a new game. Not one with Alex Kidd though, that guy sucked, and already had a similar stature to Mario anyway, so he wouldn't do. They had to think more original. SEGA president at the time, Hayao Nakayama, insisted that this character be as visually iconic as Mickey Mouse, so he had to look akin to his 80s slightly rubber-hose style. But the inspiration proved fruitful, and the character was going to be something grand, something to contrast the likes of Mario's simplistic personality, at the time I must stress. And that something went through a whole lot of design ideas, to put it lightly. Come 1990, the team of 7 members, including Naoto Oshima, a designer who worked on Phantasy Star, a mildly popular RPG series, and Yuji Naka, a longtime programmer at SEGA. This whole group would later be christened as Sonic Team, and together they were dead set on making a 2D platformer. The game engine was being developed, and the mascot character was thought to either be a wolf, a bulldog, a type of vague warrior character, a human with pajamas and a huge moustache, or a robot. But Naoto Oshima would soon chip in with the vague concept of a game. Boom! Twin stars! 2 brothers protecting the dream world from nightmares and this ominous villain dude named 13. Sounds about right for an aspiring video game in the 90s. And this whimsical setting and Oshima's endearing style would carry on some aesthetic choices, such as the loop-de-loops, the concept of dreamlike dimensions, and the player character incorporating speed in their movement. That's the key word here, speed. The team were prompted by SEGA to consider animals that were fast, then animals that were capable of rolling into a pool as a form of attack. One of these early ones was a rabbit character that could grab stuff with his long ears, but for Naka that proved to be too technologically complex for the game's current hardware. While there was talk of animal inspirations such as a kangaroo, a squirrel, or even an armadillo, ultimately Oshima's decision on a hedgehog was favoured the most. Look at him. This spiky boy design, initially nicknamed Mr. Hedgehog, was visualised by combining Felix the cat's head with Mickey Mouse's body, with the red and white coloration inspired by Santa Claus, and the shoes inspired by Michael Jackson's boots, specifically those on the album cover for Bad. From his very conception, Sonic was influenced by pop culture, both those of the 80s and the then current time period. The colour blue was also used after a couple of palette tests, seeing how he'd best stand out against the game's backgrounds. And one of Sonic's traits would be that he couldn't swim due to Yuji Naka having a wrong assumption that hedgehogs would drop like bricks if they entered water. The world around Sonic would develop alongside the hedgehog, Oshima designing other ideas for enemies, a love interest named Madonna, who would be scrapped for being too reminiscent of Princess Peach's figure. I wouldn't mind them bringing her back, she's honestly cute as heck. And other characters were considered for the game but were ultimately cut, such as Sonic being a part of a rock band in the sound test mode. But they went unused to keep the story as a simple hero versus villain narrative. Yep, every hero needs a villain, and oh, that guy, he'll do. The team brought back that Teddy Roosevelt looking guy from earlier and moulded him into a more villainous role. I'll be honest, I do have a soft spot for his bee-like coloration here, but I do prefer the design they went with later. This egg-shaped doof would act as the arch-enemy of Sonic, replacing 13 as the main antagonist, and being the polar opposite of the hero's representation of freedom, being a guy all about constructing evil robots and machinery, and being the colour red to boot. The two couldn't be more further apart. This villain, which represented industrialization and all things terrible, was eventually decided on being called Eggman. Real creative, guys. But it worked. It's about as simplistic as his design. SEGA of America would give him a different name in the marketing due to how little info they had to go by from the Japanese material, giving him the full name of Dr. Ivo Robotnik, the word Ivo being an inverse of Ovi, meaning egg in Latin, and Robotnik meant to invoke Slavic Russia with its revolutionary vibes. This was all done without SEGA of Japan's consent, by the by, and the name difference between regions would persist for years to come, though SEGA of America would sneakily have Ivo Robotnik be the character's real name, while Eggman is just a name the villain took on after his shape. In Japan, the name Robotnik is largely ignored. Programmer Yuji Naka would work on the game's engine and make it way faster than anything he worked on previously. Phantasy Star, the Ghouls and Ghosts port, Super Mario Bros., of which he was ironically a fan of. Nope, it was going to be fast-paced. Jumping on board was supervisor turned level designer Hirokazu Yusuhara, who would work on the level layout, and they created a game as colourful as it was accessible, having a visual style mildly influenced by pop artist Izin Suzuki, And though the team worked 19 hours a day, Jesus Christ, the game would ultimately prove successful for the company, selling like a gajillion copies. It really speaks for itself. Just a shame for the crunch these guys had to go through. That's enough on the development of the game. I suppose now it's good to, actually talk about the game now. Yeah, I know what you're thinking, and yes, I understand there's not much story, but I shall still go over it and give the game a quick look through before going into its other aspects. So we saw the creation of Sonic, Eggman, and the world they inhabit. Let's see how they play out. Our story takes place on South Island, a landmass which unnaturally moves across the ocean. A paradise for nature, it houses many ruins and treasures, including the 6 Chaos Emeralds, colourful gemstones of immeasurable power hidden within natural distortions of the island. Enter Sonic the Hedgehog, a speedy blue fella who enjoys freedom and running around all carefree, who finds that the place has been visited by a one Dr. Ivo Robotnik, who had trapped the little animal friends within imposing prisons and hostile robot minions, named Badniks, all in his bid to seek out the Chaos Emeralds and use their power for his evil, polluting ambitions. On his quick detour to stop the villain, Sonic traverses across the island's various landscapes, tussling with Badniks and Dr. Robotnik repeatedly. There are 7 zones in total. Green Hill Zone, a lush, watery habitat with the famous checkerboard soil which became something of a recurring motif in every game afterwards. Marble Zone, a volcanic area rife with lava and underground ruins, and lots of spiky chandeliers. Spring Yard Zone, a sparkling cityscape/theme park under an evening sun, and introducing bumpers to the series. Labyrinth Zone, a sprawling underwater cavern which houses the game's dreaded underwater sections. Starlight Zone, another city set at midnight with emerald green highways stretching across the skyline. And Scrap Brain Zone, Dr. Robotnik's polluted nightmare of a base with traps around every corner. This zone's third act takes place in a grayscale version of Labyrinth Zone, but with gross pink water, and it leads into Final Zone, where the final battle takes place. Here, Sonic kicks the good doctor off the island and brings peace to the world, with a slightly different variant of an ending depending on if you collect all 6 Chaos Emeralds or not. Like I said, it's a very basic story, but it fits well for what it is, a simple hero versus villain narrative. The player character, Sonic, is very much an angry little dog. I adore the expressions and gestures in his sprite work, from the way he scowls at you impatiently while idle, to his goofy face when teetering on the edge of platforms, the way he curls into a hedgehoggy ball when you look down, to the freaked out death pose when he gets yeeted off screen. This little guy has some range in his cartoonish design, and you can really see the rebellious streak the developers implemented in his various frames of animation. And trust me, for the time, you nary saw many expressive quirks such as these during gameplay, not counting death animations anyway. Any character can just die. Every zone has its fair share of enemies, some spread throughout the different environments, and some resigned to only one of them. The Badnik designs in this game are simple, but easily convey that they are a threat. Even with 16-bit graphics, they easily convey that they are robotic in nature, either by the details of some metallic latches or a wheel, or the big googly eyes strapped onto them. The different types of Badniks in the game are as follows. Motobugs appear in Green Hill and are the weakest of the bunch, generally just rolling forward and sluggishly turning back around at cliffs. Very much the Goomba of the game, but smarter. Buzz bombers quickly fly horizontally and only stop to fire a projectile. They appear in Green Hill, Marble, and Spring Yard Zone. Choppers are piranhas which leap up from below bridges. They only appear in Green Hill Zone. Crab meat, these googly eye guys, they shoot glowy balls from their pincers, and I used to think the hole their eyes come out of was their mouth. Neutrons come in 2 flavours. Green and yellow ones phase in and out of the background and shoot projectiles out of their mouths, and red and blue ones do the same, but they follow you in a rocket form. They are both located in Green Hill Zone. Bat brains are robotic bats that hang from the ceiling and swoop down at you. They only appear in Marble Zone. Caterkiller, metal name right there, is a segmented robot with spikes on every part except its head. They appear in Marble and Scrap Brain Zone. Spikes, not to be confused with spikes, are hermit crab bots with sharp spines on their shells. Their sides are their weak points, and they appear in Spring Yard Zone. Rollers, armadillo bots, roll down slopes behind Sonic and attempt to beat him at his own game. They only appear in Spring Yard Zone. Autobots have drills for faces, and they leap out of the ground to ambush you, but can be identified by their drills sticking out of the ground. They appear in Labyrinth Zone and the third act of Scrap Brain Zone. Jaws are scary looking, but are really only a hazard if you happen to fall on one underwater. They appear in Labyrinth Zone and the third act of Scrap Brain Zone. Orbinauts come in two types, named Unidasu and Uni in their original localization. Love these goobers. Blue ones turn red and send their spiked balls at you horizontally, and they appear in Labyrinth and, you guessed it, Act 3 of Scrap Brain Zones. Green ones always have their spike balls around them, and are otherwise invincible unless you jump on them while still flashing or while invincible. They appear in Starlight Zone. Bombs are walking bombs that sluggishly move around, lighting their fuses and exploding into projectiles when threatened. They are located in Starlight and Scrap Brain Zone. And finally, Bullhog, pig robots that drop a bouncing bomb down slopes and not much else. They only appear in Scrap Brain Zone. Other characters, though they are very much relegated to the background, are the animals. Little critters that appear when badniks blow up in a puff of smoke, when Sonic frees them from end-of-level capsules, and show up in the ending cutscene in droves. While all unique in design from one another and appearing depending on the zone, they don't have much gameplay purpose and are really just there to show the cute animals being freed thanks to your heroics. Their original Japanese names are Kucky, Flicky, returning from the Mega Drive port of the same name, Pecky, Picky, Pocky, Ricky, and Rocky. I bring this up because the American localization, after changing Eggman's name to Dr. Robotnik, also felt the need to rename most of these critters as well, possibly because Kucky would sound really freaking weird to say. These names will be changed to, and tell me if you've heard these before, Sally Acorn, Johnny Lightfoot, Joe Sushi, Tux, Chirps, and Porker Lewis. All of these names and species going on to inspire well-known characters in the Sonic SatAM cartoon and Fleetway's Sonic the Comic series. That's pretty heckin' cool. Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman, or as I sometimes call him, Fishface, appears at the end of Act 3 for every zone, not counting the second to last one. Acting more as a general menace, he obstructs your progress in his floating pod, the Eggmobile, with a deadly gadget attached to it. Sometimes it's a checker wrecker ball on a chain, a now iconic boss visual for the series. Sometimes it's a spike, one time he just lets the surrounding obstacles attack you, and one time in a crusher room, the only one not fought in the pod. While the game has no character dialogue, Robotnik's facial animations can change for a small period of time to reflect his current mood. If you get injured, he giggles at the camera. If you land a hit on him, he grimaces while in a flashing damage effect. And when his mech gets destroyed and falls apart, his skin and moustache, humorously, turn a shade of crimson out of anger. He also appears in person in the last zone and exudes a silly but still threatening personality. He's a very goofy villain amongst a cast that mostly consists of fluffy animals. In-game, Sonic the Hedgehog can attack by spin-jumping at enemies or by rolling into a ball while walking. It's always fun doing that, especially at the mildly high speeds of which you can run in some zones. The level design is often made with speed in mind, with more than a couple of loop-de-loops, curved terrain, and ramps. Not all zones are speed-based, however. Most of them, as a matter of fact, require a lot of patience and are rather slow-paced. Running with reckless abandon is usually a quick way to losing a life, but that could just be the way I play. I'm usually more methodological when it comes to games, otherwise it's gotta go slow. The level design is wild but fun to traverse through. I did notice a couple of repeating layouts between acts, but there's always secret passages hidden throughout when you hug walls, and a lot of different routes you can take to get to the big old goalpost at the end, an iconic staple with Robotnik's smiling mug that is flipped around to show Sonic's cheerful face instead. If you feel the need to look around, or make Sonic's head bob to the music, like I do, you can also look up and down in the game, which isn't too useful unless you're in a more vertical area and you don't want to be hit by any off-screen enemies. And the delay between the player input and the screen moving makes the thrilling gameplay screech to a halt. Recurring obstacles include scary-looking spikes, some there in the open, some alternating in and out of the scenery, and some attached to swinging maces. I'm uncertain if they are Eggman traps or just a natural part of Sonic's world. There are also springs, rubbery objects which propel Sonic into the air, across gaps, or just act as a nuisance. Yellow ones are more lax in the distance they launch you, but the red ones send you flying into fricking orbit if you're not careful, or into lava. God damn it. Helpful items include monitors, these 80s television sets which are literally made to be smashed. They can contain blue shields that allow Sonic to take an additional hit, 1-ups to give you an extra life in the form of Sonic's chibi little head, fast boots, which make you run at ludicrous speeds for a few seconds, bunches of 10 rings, and an invincibility power-up that surrounds Sonic in seizure-inducing sparkles for a couple of seconds as you mow your way through enemies, though you can still die from crushing platforms and drowning. A fun little real-life Holmes tidbit, me and my cousin used to call this power-up magic dust. We were very weird and very autistic. Speaking of rings, all throughout the game are these gold rings hovering above the ground and generally guiding the player in the right direction. Having them in your possession is key to surviving, as whenever you get hit by an obstacle, you drop all of them in total shock, scattering them all over the terrain before they vanish completely. It's quite infuriating when you lose so many and see Sonic just explode rings out of him. Me too, buddy. But at least it gives you an opportunity to pick them up and keep the adventure going, as well as give you a few moments of invulnerability. You die and lose a life if you get hurt without any rings, so as long as you have at least one in your possession, you'll be a-okay. You get an extra life if you collect 100 of them, which gets increasingly hard in later stages where obstacles and spiky balls are plentiful. Throughout the stage there are star posts, which make a little ding-dong noise, and are the things that you'll respawn to after you die. As well as a signpost, at the end of every act there's invisible points that can be collided with to add to your score, although it's totally superfluous. And if you have 50 rings upon reaching it, a giant ring will be there with which Sonic can jump into. Here you enter the Special Zone, a trippy dimension where the Chaos Emeralds are held in crystal barriers. They are tricky to reach, requiring you to memorize all these rotating psychedelic maps and the various obstacles within, including those annoying bumpers. If you collide with a goal button, you are ejected from the zone and continue the game where you left off. There's not really any achievement to collecting these glorified jelly beans. The only thing that changes is new plants popping up in the ending cutscene and Robotnik stomping in frustration on the end screen, instead of tauntingly juggling any Chaos Emerald you hadn't collected. You know, seeing this fat man mug off at the player makes me really want to discuss how the game looks, so I will cover that next. Ah, look at this title screen. Nice and simple, with the added flourish of Sonic popping in through a winged ring and wagging his finger in a crude manner. He's got attitude, alright. It's important to note that Sonic the Hedgehog was one of the better looking games on the Mega Drive at the time, primarily through its backgrounds and the different particle effects. Games such as Outed Beast's port weren't handled very well, and character animations were relatively stiff and limited there. But here, we get more than 2 frames of animation for both characters and background objects. The flowers in Green Hill Zone and the neon lights in Spring Yard Zone coming to mind. The game employed the use of parallax scrolling, a technique where certain parts of the background move horizontally at different speeds to give the illusion of distance. While this was used in other Mega Drive games, and it's pretty easy to find the seams in which the parts are separated, there's no denying that this was very impressive in the early 90s. I especially love it in Starlight Zone, where they add objects in the foreground too. Things like this really helped make the graphics pop, not to mention the vivid colours in Special Zone, along with their neat screen rotating effects and morphing animals in the background. One effect I think goes underappreciated is the title card for each act, filling the screen with darkness and giving you only a name to go by, while the music kicks in and gives way to the lush locales. It really makes you sit in anticipation for what the next zone is going to look like. Future games would have more than just darkness and one primary colour, but it's worth pointing out as a visual experience. There's also details that were lost in the advent of modern technology, such as the waterfalls in Green Hill Zone, the game's shield, and the shimmering effect on the water's surface in Labyrinth Zone. While the last 2 were fixed to just be one slightly transparent layer, the waterfalls are a different story. No matter the 2D game, they always appear as blue columns 2 pixels apart to give the illusion of transparent water, but on televisions in the 90s, that effect had additional depth and colour. It was good for its time, and it was sadly lost. Another is the effect when the screen fades in and out of black in level transitions, which I was dearly missing when playing the Sonic Origins re-release. On the original Mega Drive, there was a subtle darkening effect, where the game's colour palette would lean towards a dark blue before finally settling on an inky black. It's very minor, but it's a shame that they didn't emulate this in ports. Being a launch title for the Sega Mega Drive, the audio quality isn't that bad, though maybe a little standard compared to future games on the console. The sound bites used throughout are sharp and invigorating, be it from the player or just general sound effects like the satisfying collecting of rings. The way they overlap when you collect them is gratifying. Makes you feel rich just listening to it. Other significant sounds include the ding-dong of a starpost, the cartoony boing upon breaking open a badnik or monitor, the crunchy crumbling sound when the floor falls apart below your feet, the bizarre wow when you get a shield, the murky sploosh when fireballs appear as obstacles, the ominous timer when your air is silently counting down in Labyrinth Zone, the chaotic ping sound of bumpers in Spring Yard Zone, the dumbfounded fart noise when you lose a life, and the boink when you enter a giant ring, signifying your entry into the special zone. Notably, this game doesn't have too many audibly grating sound effects like other games did with their particular twang-sounding noises that had persisted since the Macintosh era of computer games. It's all the more better for it, really, though the saw blade sound is rightfully shrill. What the crap, that thing just chased me! For the soundtrack, Sonic Team commissioned a one Masato Nakamura, songwriter and bassist of the J-pop band Dreams Come True. I pity the guy. Understandably, it was tricky due to the Mega Drive being limited by the number of sounds that can play at a time, and the instruments themselves are much more rudimentary than real ones. Nonetheless, his music for Sonic stands out and has quite the range, making for a pretty robust soundtrack. And all of it was composed by this guy, from the level themes, to the end of level jingle, to the dreaded drowning music that foreshadows your inevitable underwater demise. Whew, that was close. Since I can count the number of music tracks in this game on my freaking fingers, I shall cut the background music, kick up a chair, and talk about every track individually like the freaking Sonic nerd that I am. The game's main theme is pretty iconic, used on the title screen, when you get invincibility, and with a special rendition in the ending cutscene and credits. It's also used in the little game over jingle, but I never heard it that much. I'm a pro gamer! It's so synonymous with the classic era that not only would it be reused for a couple more games in the future, but it even made it in the Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. Food for thought. Green Hill Zone's theme, probably the most iconic and reused theme in anything Sonic related, has a bouncy, cheerful beat, perfect for encouraging you onward as you take in the 16-bit sights. It's good, and rightfully deserves its legacy of being remixed over and over again, though I can't say the same for the zone itself. Marble Zone's track is a much more mellow tune, almost bordering on threatening, but it still sounds adventurous, like you're digging your way out of a cave towards the welcoming light. Hearing this while passing darkened cells underground was a trip for Baby Holmes. Spring Yard Zone is a more bumpy and pop-inspired tune, very appropriate for the maze-like cityscape you wander through. It's not one of my favourites, and it can be a little annoying, but it's not bad. You really get sick of the game's drumbeat soundbite after a while. Labyrinth Zone. My word, Labyrinth Zone. The level may be a claustrophobic subterranean nightmare, but boy does the music slap. It's got an upbeat melody that's more of an earworm than even Green Hills, as if encouraging you through an otherwise treacherous terrain. It's the one redeeming factor of the zone, except for maybe the cheese blocks. Starlight Zone's tune, by contrast, is a peaceful track with a slow, calm beat. The music complements the Midnight Sky locale very well. The instrumentation isn't exactly to my liking, but I can see why people like it. I enjoy piano remixes of it myself. Scrap Brain Zone has a tune that oozes finality. It's got a good build-up and an ominous, almost sci-fi sounding backing track, as if it were calculating to be the most efficient fortress music ever. It's more fitting in the mechanical stronghold than it is when Sonic is flushed into the fricking toilet. Special Zone's music is as delightfully whimsical as it is distant and somber, like a sonnet written for all of the Chaos Emeralds that are barely out of your reach. Like with other tracks, the song fits well with the general vibe of the zone, especially when you're pulling your hair out trying to escape those stupid goal orbs. The music when you confront Dr. Robotnik is super menacing. The sudden shift from Green Hills to the boss music is almost like a tonal jump scare. My only problem is that it's pretty short, and loops fairly often. The Final Zone's theme builds off of the boss one by including more ominous instruments, adding a climactic tone to the whole thing. Really makes you think this is the final showdown after all the crap he gave you throughout the game. Did I miss any out? Oh yeah, the credits theme is also nice and good to listen to after beating the whole game, giving you familiar tunes whilst playing demos of the zones you had travelled through. It's like it's showcasing all of Sonic's best moments, even if he does collide with things weirdly. Since Sonic the Hedgehog's release, there has been a heavy ROM hack scene, and there always will be because SEGA encourages it, which is honestly refreshing to see in this day and age. SEGA really do what Nintendo don't. Sonic the Hedgehog Megamix was probably one of the first ROM hacks, but there's been many others, from full zone conversions, ones incorporating unused elements like rolling checkerballs and the scrapped rabbit enemy, Splats, to including whole new playable characters, even those from other Sonic media. There's been countless ones over the years, far too many to count in this video, so please don't ask. But things like this really show just how creative the Sonic fanbase can be, and how obsessed we are over unused content. The game has received multiple ports and re-releases over the years, but I'll only talk about the more notable ones. As of this video's release, it had several on the Mega Drive in the mid to late 90s, packed with other games to help promote them during the console wars. An arcade version which had most stages and zones axed to give the players a more archaic, streamlined experience. It was one of the games playable in Sonic Jam for the Sega Saturn in 1997. This one came with a spin dash feature that future games introduced. Sonic Mega Collection and its additions during the early 2000s. I personally enjoyed them a lot for their interface and menu music alone. A beyond infamous Game Boy Advance port which had the spin dash move but was cursed with slowdown and screen crunch. A playable version was included in the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 versions of Sonic Generations, emulated from the Sonic Jam version, but it was omitted in the PC version to make the game run better. The iOS re-release developed by Christian Whitehead and Headcanon. Now this one is special. Since it was done by people who did ROM hacks back in the day, these guys knew what to do and gave the option to play as Miles Tails Prower and Knuckles the Echidna. One for Sega Ages, Sonic the Hedgehog for the Nintendo Switch. This one had new modes and the option to use the drop dash from Sonic Mania. The Sonic Origins port, which used the iOS one and had pretty much all of the new features already mentioned, including widescreen support. And finally, Sonic Origins Plus, which added Amy Rose as a playable character. Man, with this many ports, this sure sounds like a well-played game. And that's the first Sonic game. It's fair to say that the original holds up well over the years, even if future games improve on nearly all of its elements. It's not super great, and when playing it can get pretty damn frustrating at parts. But the hallmarks were there, and it led to the Sonic franchise being a thing, which I can't help but be thankful for, even for all the hair loss. Many, if not all of the problems I had, or things I was unsatisfied with, get fixed the more into the classic series we go. But I'd certainly recommend this game if you ever want to relive the nostalgia like me. It's available on pretty much anything now since Sonic went multi-platform. And thank you for watching this video up to this point. I'm still getting the hang of making longman content and geeking out for just the right amount of time, but please let me know what you think in the comments. I appreciate any and all criticism thrown my way. Give it to me real hard. I've survived Labyrinth Zone back in the day. I should be fine. We all love an unconventional video game, whether it's a title in a franchise that stands out among others on launch, a standalone game with a unique playstyle or mechanics, or just one that's more likely to kick you in the crotch. It's always something worth praising in its own right. This installment in the rapidly successful Sonic the Hedgehog franchise, especially in the 90s, was quite the eye-opening title, boasting explorable maps, an innovative time-travelling mechanic, and a CD-quality soundtrack. This game seemed positively delighted in its own unconventionality. However, not many players got to experience this on first launch. Yours truly didn't play it until cross-platform ports came about. Several console generations later, the game has been acknowledged and discussed in fandom circles, comparing it favourably and unfavourably to other Sonic games close to its original release date. Being the record highest selling CD game of all time, how unique is this title, and does the gameplay truly hold up? Come with me on a journey as we breeze across this game's past, present, and future. That sounded so cool. For a multinational video game company like SEGA, the original Sonic the Hedgehog was a huge success. It helped get their name on the markets, and for a time got their console to sell more than their rival company's Super Nintendo Entertainment System, albeit briefly. Riding that high, a sequel was shortly developed on by the SEGA Technical Institute in the US, which the original game's programmer, Yuji Naka, went along with, jumping at the chance to get away from SEGA's rigid corporate policies. At the same time, Sonic for the Sega Master System and Game Gear was being produced by Aspect, and back in Japan, the company was cooking up its own follow-up game with their latest hardware. The Sega CD was an add-on to the Genesis, allowing for better, more advanced features like a faster CPU, better quality music that outshone that of any console at the time, and implementing sprite scaling and rotation. They had every right to boast about this. The Sega CD was a powerhouse with a hefty price tag to match. Yeah, it didn't sell too well. The higher-ups at SEGA thought to incorporate the Sega CD add-on to the original Sonic the Hedgehog game, with the Hedgehog's original designer, Naoto Oshima, put in charge as director. It should be noted that he would have come along with Naka to help with Sonic 2's development, but was told to stay behind by the president of SEGA. The pitch was to make a beefier, more enhanced port of Sonic 1 to show off the console's advanced features, but would, over time, develop into its own project, titled CD Sonic the Hedgehog at first, before switching the CD around to the end of the title. A large majority of fans simply refer to it as Sonic CD because it's short and snappy. Beginning pre-production, when Sonic 2 was in the middle of development, on this crazy train was not only Oshima, but also Nahofumi Hateya and Masafumi Ogata on music composing roles, and staff who had previously worked on non-Sonic titles like Streets of Rage and Revenge of Shinobi. Quite a combination to say the least. Instead of the focus being on traditional 2D obstacle courses, or on speed like the Sonic 2 team was doing, Oshima chose explorative platforming and big maps to help make the world of Sonic feel larger and add more replayability to the gameplay. The guys had both the hardware and time to achieve what their creative team desired, as Sega was much less pressuring during production. It was later assumed that it was due to the game not being a numbered title like Sonic 2. Bet Naka wished he stayed, huh? I said you wished you stayed. The game's premise, which involved time travel and specifically something moving at a continuous speed to achieve that, was inspired by the 1985 film Back to the Future, where the main character's car hopped to different time periods after achieving 1.21 gigawatts of power from driving fast. The concept of different time periods allowed the team much room for creative freedom, giving every stage in each zone 4 distinct variants, with every level having different music tracks to boot. You can't say they weren't ambitious. Very interesting that both Sonic 2 and Sonic CD juggled with the idea of time travel as a gameplay mechanic. But then again, Naka and Oshima did exchange design ideas during development of both, so it might have been traded around? Who knows really? This game also holds the award for the first to have an animated intro and ending cutscene, produced by Studio Junio, who in turn were subcontracted by Toei Animation. Yep, that's Toei Animation. Although rather bit-crushed and low quality in its original appearance, it had to go through many steps just to be included, like being passed through the Mega Drive's video chip, not to mention being compressed so it could be streamed in real time on a CD. The traditionally drawn animation style cannot be overlooked. It even used the STM file format for it, which made the opening and ending animations look much better than what you would usually see on the Sega CD games with their sign pack compression. And look at this animation. This stuff was like peak classic Sonic, and the way the character looked helps define the Hedgehog's silent, badass characterization. The reason for them going this hard was also supposedly due to feedback that the endings of Sonic 1 and 2 were too plain, which, fair, this was still the early era of the Genesis we're talking about. This title also marks the first appearance of 2 new characters in the games, ones that would be important enough to be permanent members of the main cast. We have newcomer Kazuyuki Hoshino to thank for that, who, even before becoming Sonic Team's creative director, was already contributing to the Hedgehog's world with his artistic talents. One of these characters was Amy Rose, Sonic's self-proclaimed girlfriend, who was so endearing for the team to work on that they all contributed to her design, not limited to Hoshino or Oshima. It's her first appearance in-game, though manga fans would recognise an incarnation of her in the Japan-only Shogakukan magazines, which were published a year before the release of Sonic CD. Side note, but I like her design here in Shogaku Ninensei stories too. The brown hair and green dress are a neat combination. From one well-known character to the next, Metal Sonic, a robotic version of the titular Hedgehog, coincidentally designed during a time where every Sonic 1 sequel-type game had their own variant on the concept, is a character so popular after his appearance in this game, I'm surprised he never got his own spin-off material. Imagined as a strong rival to Sonic, Hoshino struck gold the moment he put pencil to paper, where even in early sketches of the character he would barely be changed at all except for the head and more metal guards on his limbs. In the end looking really cool, like, this is one cool robot. Back on the development of the game itself, there was originally going to be an extra round in between the first two stages, known by fans as R2 in the game's code, short for Round 2, the levels in the game being called R1 and R3. Hints of its existence even appeared in the ending cutscene, as the animations were worked on close to the start of production. Conceived with the theme of underground ruins, and later found to have been called dubious depths, there's not been many hints as to what it actually looked like, and sprites of unused enemies and a boss mech would be cleaned up and revealed to the public. It was cut early in development for being too slow and cumbersome to explore in a game where you're meant to run fast. That's what Oshima would state, although Masato Nishimura would imply that there was just not enough space for the music, and that they couldn't figure out a visual for it. It was stated that the music that plays during the sound test menu would have been its present theme, however. There were also two monitor types that were omitted from the final release, them being the blue ring monitors, which gave Sonic an invisible shield in the prototypes, but would actually be a predecessor to the combine ring power-up in some later titles, and a clock monitor that would stop time temporarily, including the rotation of rings and disabling the floor in the Wacky Workbench level. To add to the unused stuff, the special stages were originally designed to be more in line with Sonic 1's, with the rotating mazes, just with two different layers on the map which would be seen in the background. It would have incorporated the SEGA CD's rotating function, but the developers were not satisfied, and all that exists of this concept is this single image, sadly. The music was perhaps the biggest feat this game achieved, because what could they do with all this free space? Well, time to use proper audio. For this title, they were freed from the trappings that the Genesis and all that had with their limited audio quality. Not to say that it was bad per se, anyone who knows me recognises that I'm a huge chiptune enjoyer, but for the developers, this must have felt like a massive weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Hateya and Ogata, both of whom were on the Sonic 2 8-bit team, were thus brought on to compose this game's soundtrack. In accordance to the director's vision, and with him closely working with them as development continued, they went with an OST more in line with club and house music, the kinds of stuff that you would hear in a teenager's bedroom at max volume, all due to how popular that scene was becoming in Japan. This soundtrack would be kept for overseas releases, except when Sega of America heard the tracks, disapproved of how they sounded, and would delay the game for 2 months to make a wholly different soundtrack. Apparently they were looking for something more musically rich and complex, and to achieve that, they hastily got Spencer Nilsson and David Young of Sega Multinational Studio to compose replacement songs for most of the tracks, with all these guys also involved. Sorry, I didn't have enough space. Due to how short a time they had, and how tricky it was to redo sequenced PCM audio tracks, they left the past version of the zones as they were. The decision to change the soundtrack, in the fans' eyes, has been a source of contention for about 3 decades now. Some prefer the original music, while others are okay with it, or even prefer the US tracks, but I'll get into that can of worms later. The original Japanese box art for the game is relatively nice, with Sonic and his robotic doppelganger charging at each other. It's simple, but it gets the message across nicely. I'm unsure who illustrated it, but if I had to guess, it was character designer Hoshino, due to how good Metal Sonic looks. The European box art has that same character art, but with them in an intense staring contest. It goes harder than the other one, I feel, especially with that spinning CD typography. The US box art is a little extra, with Greg Martin brought back to draw everyone's favourite weird-eyed mohawk boy. Only kidding. I appreciate how much of the beautifully chaotic energy of the game is captured on this cover in the most 90s way possible. Even Metal Sonic doesn't look half bad in his style. Following all that ambition and mostly undisturbed production time, the original release of Sonic CD in Japan would be on September 23rd, 1993, and in Europe a few weeks after, in October, while the US version would be released later on. It would be alongside Sonic Chaos and Sonic Spinball as part of Sega America's Sonic 3 on 1 day release strategy. What was Sonic 3 on 1 day? Stick around a few months to find out. So let's see how this time travel talk and gameplay mechanics all turned out. The placement of Sonic CD in the timeline is constantly in flux, so I'll save that talk for later and leave it ambiguous for this part of the video. Somewhere on Sonic's world exists Never Lake, a massive, pristine spot of nature that Little Planet, a mystical satellite, is set to appear over for exactly 1 month before disappearing every year. Also called Miracle Planet and described as a world that defies time, it is known to contain the Time Stones, which, when collected, allows one to freely travel the timeline and even change history. In the wrong hands, this could muck up anything and everything. So obviously Dr. Eggman has to come and try another world domination plot. He doesn't acquire the Time Stones themselves, but he does make use of the planetoid's temporal passages to secure his hold over the various locales. So Little Planet ends up chained in place so it doesn't teleport anywhere, and a big metallic shell is built around the thing. How does this work without disrupting the ecosystem? Rule of cool, of course. Following the Hedgehog's last adventure, where he tussled with his arch-nemesis, Sonic nonchalantly races around at top speed without a care in the world. He soon sees what Robotnik has done to the place and, unamused, neumes right in there to put a stop to his evil plans. He soon discovers that not only has the villain invaded with his Badnik forces, but also that they seem to have been there way longer than first observed. Indeed, through time travel, the Big Bad has conquered each of Little Planet's settlements, and when travelling to the future, Sonic can see that they become a polluted hellscape of a place. Obviously he's not going to take that lying down, so he travels to the past of each area to change the future into a good one. He's also briefly followed by Amy Rose, a pink hedgehog who is forever smitten with the guy and gives good hugs. She came in there because her tarot cards had predicted a destined encounter on Little Planet with the guy, but she ends up getting kidnapped by Metal Sonic a little while after. As the journey continues, with the Big Bad attempting to stop him at every turn, Sonic eventually confronts that menacing robot copy in person, where instead of a full-on fight, Metal Sonic challenges him to a race to the death. Sonic wins, obviously, and frees the captured Amy Rose past the finish line, getting more hugs in the process. Sorry, Sonic. The Blue Blur shortly arrives at the Doctor's stronghold and destroys his final mech. This causes a chain reaction explosion as the metallic shell around the planet falls apart, but Sonic is able to rescue Amy from the collapsing fortress and bring her to safety at Never Lake. What proceeds are one of two endings. The bad ending, where you did not acquire the Time Stones, has Robotnik still about and getting a rock thrown at him for good measure. Get wrecked, buddy. And Little Planet returning after the credits in its not rescued state. The good ending has the planetoid freed from Robotnik's influence, and, seemingly as thanks, it disappears, as it does, with sparkles in the sky shaped like Sonic's face. After the credits, flora from Little Planet starts to appear around Never Lake, and filling the hills with an abundance of flowers. Charmy B would hecking love that. Due to Sonic CD sharing the same engine as Sonic 1, the gameplay is almost exactly as you would expect, including rings as an extra hit, monitors to bash open, and air bubbles to put in your mouth. But there's a couple key changes and additions. For one thing, there's a hidden S monitor in the game, which grants Sonic invincibility, super speed, and freezes time for all objects and enemies for a couple of seconds. It's only seen underneath the ground in the first boss level. Speaking of, the naming of levels is different in this game. Zones are now rounds, and the 3 acts in these rounds are called zones, with the last one containing the boss battle. The maps in these rounds are much bigger than before, both horizontally and vertically, and branch out into many directions. I mean, look at this, they're like a big old playground to explore. On one hand, they make for a satisfying sense of exploration, especially early levels, though I will admit it can be frustrating in the more winding ones and taking time-hopping mechanics into account. Again, more on that later. There are a couple of sound effects that are different, including a lower-pitched jump sound, the sound of skidding to a halt being different, the spikes having a more crunchy, jutting sound when they come in and out of the scenery, and in place of the drowning music, there's this foreboding, bubbling sound that ticks down from 5. Kind of reminds me of the one in the 8-bit Sonic games, where there's just a constant ticking noise instead of the music. Also, the bumpers. Another cool detail I appreciate is on the special stage results screen, where instead of a blank white colour, there's this cloudy background. I don't know, I like it. The spin dash is a key part in the Hedgehog's moveset, although it does not function the same as in Sonic 2. Instead of tapping the button a couple of times and becoming an oval shape before launching forward, no matter the quickness of which you initiate it, in Sonic CD you instead need to give it time to rev up, or else it won't work, and the graphic used is the same as the spin attack. The Super Peel Out is a new move and animation introduced in this game, useful when you require a burst of speed during a standstill with a rather cool animation. Its name refers to a racing term when a car stays still and causes the tyres to heat up and release smoke, which is very appropriate. I mean, look at him, he's steaming smoke all over the place. It and the spin dash are basically the same, right down to sharing the sound effects, so it is admired more for its visual charm rather than its functionality. Time overs return and give you 10 minutes to get through a level, though a hidden game over trigger was added if you let Sonic wait around for 3 minutes with no button input. It also comes with a voice clip of Sonic saying "I'm outta here" with a death glare towards the player.
I'm outta here!
Yellow and red springboards return in full force, and are often incorporated into a couple of level gimmicks. In this game, when launching from vertical ones, Sonic does a little twirl as he is flung into the air. Springs in the first and last rounds can also be seen moving back and forth on wheels during certain platforming segments. There are some later that pop out of the ground behind you, and ones attached to cannons in the penultimate stage can launch Sonic in a specific direction or when you hit the jump button again. Spikes reappear as a recurring obstacle in nearly every zone, although their design is altered to be different from both Sonic 1 and 2, them being a little closer together and also not having some of them darker to give the illusion of depth. They are also very white. Star posts have their Sonic 1 design but with a cone-shaped base. When passed by, they do a little ding-dong noise while the sphere circles around in a slow arc. Time warp signs are an object exclusive to Little Planet, and are how the player character travels between the different time periods. They come in two types, ones that take you forward in time and those that bring you back in era, with a wavy sounding future or past audio clip playing as you pass under. They are scattered around the zones and make it so Sonic has some glowy stars whenever he runs, also making it so Badniks cannot physically harm you. I didn't know about that until recently. You need to be running for a good couple seconds, and that includes being knocked around by springs before initiating a time warp. There is a dazzling transition cutscene before the world loads in, dropping you exactly where you were moving last. If you bump into something while the icon on the bottom is flashing, then the time warp gets cancelled and you lose the chance to hop timelines. Much like star posts, they are a one-use object, so you can't redo attempts. They also never appear in the third zone of a round because they are permanently a future setting. The past version of almost every non-boss round also contains two objects of varying importance. There are Metal Sonic holograms, which display the copycats stepping on animals. They act more as optional objects to destroy and allow animals of that zone's past and present variants to jump about in the background. You don't get any points for destroying them, and they are more for story purposes, because they are placed there by Robotnik to make the little animals afraid of Sonic when he arrives. Robot transporters, often named roboticizers by fans, are the key to getting the good ending due to them being the in-law reason that the Badniks are able to travel between timelines. They appear in two forms. Ones in the present are already broken down, but they give a hint to where the destructible one is located in the past. Yeah, you can break these, even though it looks like they'll give the Hedgie boy a nasty shock. Knocking them down destroys all Badniks in that zone, no matter the time period, and they are all automatically destroyed if Sonic has gotten all the time stones. The title cards are a little more extra, and instead show the background so it's not just a black void or with some colourful shapes. It's a nice touch, and I love the different text and typography, though part of me will always miss the slow anticipation before the level reveals itself. Continues also don't exist, though the continue icon is used for the extra life you can get from the special stage. What else? There's the currently rare dash panels, only seen in one of the rounds and appearing as grey protrusions on the ground instead of spinning wheels. The flame trail left afterwards really shows the game's Back to the Future influences. The gold plates function the same as previous games, being at the end of every non-boss zone and having a different design, with the Robotnik ones having a menacing thumbs down and Sonic one with a slightly more serious half smile to go with the somewhat less light-hearted tone the game's going for. Special stages work like in Sonic 1, where you must have at least 50 rings to have a giant ring appear at the end to jump into. These timed bonus modes are instead roads situated in a large body of water, where Sonic runs forward in a pseudo-3D map with Mode 7 looking effects. They were supposedly inspired by Super Mario Kart that had recently come out, and it certainly feels like you're controlling Sonic in a racing game, just with very futuristic and psychedelic backgrounds with a neat parallax scrolling effect. The objective is to run to floating UFOs and destroy them, there being 6 in total, though other types that give you goodies also show up. as well as water, which drastically drains your seconds away. Other gimmicks on these maps include bumpers, springs, fans which make you float into the air and potentially into targets, teeth-like icons on the floor which make you screech to a halt if you run over them, and various sizes of dash panels that launch you in their indicated direction. Each of the 7 time stones have their own layout and background, and there is also an unused one hidden in the game's sound test mode with Robotnik's face in the background, the map affectionately nicknamed Eggman's bathtub by fans. Destroying all 6 UFOs has Sonic suddenly stand still, have the camera whisk around, and show him acquiring a time stone. Getting all of them secures you the game's good ending. Accessible from the game's main menu are also a time attack mode, where you can replay levels and have your name up on the in-game leaderboard. There is also a sound test mode to listen to the game's OSTs if you felt like chilling out after some exciting or frustrating gameplay. Speaking of levels, I suppose I ought to go into those real quick. This gets its own section because them and their different time periods are integral to the experience, from past to future. First off, I rather like the title screen. It's more of a redo of Sonic 1's with the watery background and mountains in the distance, but with the Robotnik-faced rock face and mechanized little planet in the sky. The slightly 3D Sonic sprites are neat, even if it's contained in a weird, dull gold banner, and the Sonic sprites were modelled after an actual 3D sculpture by Tako Molkino. A Palm Tree Panic is the starter round of the game, outdoing Green Hill Zone in just how tropical it looks, and I appreciate that Little Planet doesn't have that same checkerboard look. Triangular patterned soil and giant loop-de-loops adorn the foreground, while large mountains with trickling waterfalls can be seen in the distance. There are also hidden platforms that function differently depending on the time period. The past is all muted browns and purples with more untamed flora. The bad future has everything, the mountains, the ocean, and even the trees themselves become machines built to pump chemicals in the air and water, and the good future is that same aesthetic but more vivid and colourful and environmentally friendly. It gives me a solar punk feel, to be honest. The round was originally called Salad Plain in early development, and the boss for this zone is the EGGHVC001. Wow. Collision Chaos is the second round. A nature-filled construction site with curious neon lights, many bumpers and pinball-esque obstacles, and a weird mirroring effect where the bottom half of the background also appears on the top. The past is an undisturbed bunch of floating dirt-brown islands with some construction going on. The bad future is a grey nightmare of a place with blood-red mountains, and the good future is a paradise with potted plants mixed with machinery. Very economic. The boss here is the Egg Tilter, where he puts you in a pinball machine for far too long. Tidal Tempest is this game's underwater level. Deep, trap-filled ruins located at the base of volcanoes. This round is very much a more enjoyable labyrinth zone, at least aesthetically. The past is a pristine, rocky cavern with the water at its lowest. The bad future has its natural landmarks replaced with rusted, broken-down machinery, and its water level is at its highest. And the good future is the same, but with plants preserved within glass domes throughout the cave. The boss at the end is the Egg Bubble. Quartz Quadrant, a mine filled with green crystals and conveyor belts. This round is notable for having 2 different backgrounds for the indoor and outdoor areas, where there is a kind of swamp outside the factory. The past is a lime green cavern with hardly a single bit of technology and a cave full of crystals. The bad future is miles upon miles of factories mining the place dry, with ominous empty lava warehouses instead of a mine. And the good future is seemingly a whole underground city made entirely from that very same quartz. The boss here is that work that sucker to death machine, the egg conveyor. Wacky Workbench, an industrial site with warehouses full of dangerous hazards and electrical conduits, and floors which bounce you right up into the sky if you touch them, although sometimes they are switched off and come back on after a few seconds. The past has the zone bathed in green and is under construction with Red Canyon seen in the background. The bad future has the place a rusted brown and clearly breaking down at the seams. And the good future looks like a toy factory with bright colours and abstract shapes. The original name for the round was going to be Crazy Toy Box, and the boss here is the Egg Raiser. Stardust Speedway is one of the fastest levels in the history of Sonic, and for good reason. There's twisting highways and tunnels everywhere. This urban-looking city has trumpets and other musical instruments line its roads, a giant Robotnik statue under construction in Zone 2, and is also where the background's parallax scrolling effect is at its most beautiful. Look at that, that's so visually appealing. The past has a more Roman city feel for it, with plants replacing the technology on the roadways. The bad future is a crimson dystopian cityscape under an electrical storm, as the Robotnik statue is complete and operational, as the good future is a futuristic amusement park with a light purple and green colour palette. The boss here is the Metal Boy. Metallic Madness, the final round of the game. A giant green-coloured facility with death traps around every turn. Think of Scrap Brain Zone, but on steroids. I mean, look at how big this place is. This round has many gimmicks, including shrink rays, spinning blades on wheels, and turnstiles that allow you to move around in the background. Zone 3 is also the only place in the game where bottomless pits exist. The past is the fortress while it is under construction, with cranes dotting the skyline. The bad future is a base left in disrepair and neglected to rust forever. And the good future is seemingly a repurposed fortress used to protect and tend to plants rather than remove them. The final boss fort is the Egg Spinner. Yeah, no giant mech this time, just the amazing spinning man. Sorry, concept art time again, but you reckon the bodysuit or Psycho Egg would have made a better concept? I certainly think so anyway. And that's each of the zones and their different time periods. Think it's not too late to talk about the music? Let's hecking go! You guys want to know how I first came across the Japanese soundtrack when I was a wee lad, years before the internet was more accessible? Well, sit down buckos, it's time for a quick story. So, my first Sonic game ever was Sonic the Hedgehog 3, the PC port to be exact. The music was entirely in MIDI format, not great to listen to or really be seen as appealing. Another thing at the time I enjoyed doing, a little too much probably, was go on my computer and open the disc, like the actual disk drive to see and hear the game's assets and music in all its original 16-bit glory. Inexplicably, there was the OSTs and sound effects for each of the games, 1, 2, 3 and Knuckles, but there was also an extra file. It had all these mostly complete songs I had never heard anywhere before. Some of them sound like they belonged on the Genesis, but they were clearer, and sung by actual people at times. My autism brain was so stimulated by these new tracks, I would just play them out loud and just vibe. Later, I would finally experience Sonic CD proper when it was introduced in Sonic Gems collection, which only came with the US soundtrack, so I didn't think much of it. Then I heard the past version of the levels, and it was like a door threw open in my brain. That was part of that hidden soundtrack I heard as a kid. Holy crap, it came from here this whole time. Later, I would listen to the Japanese soundtrack online. Then I listened to remixes of those songs. Then I made AMVs of these songs in my head and even drew art while listening, letting the music overwhelm my brain. Sonic CD's original soundtrack is pure vibe. The angels themselves singing to the tune of funky, enigmatically wonderful songs that make you feel like you're walking on clouds. I listen to them in my spare time, when I'm going out to work, even right now I'm listening to them. The Japanese soundtrack is just that special to me, and I feel the vision its creators nurtured in my very soul. It's a good thing I make, or else people would think I want to have sex with it. For analysis, let's start with the Japanese OST, because that was conceived first. Sonic CD was the first in the series to feature vocal tracks, performed by Keito Yotoku. Sonic You Can Do Anything, often called Toot Toot Sonic Warrior for its lyrics, is used as the intro music in the original Japanese release, composed by Otega, and Cosmic Eternity, Believe in Yourself was done by Hateya. That one is really chill and underrated, very much my favourite vocal tune in the game overall. I'm not a music guy by any means, but both have a very peppy vibe that's just filled with adrenaline and excitement. It sounds like everyone's having a good time at least. As well as using extensive vocal sampling, the team also made use of popular house musicians at the time, including Zero G data files too. Music tracks for levels set in the past timelines were composed using the Genesis instruments, or more specifically the old sample-based PCM audio, which was an intentional design choice to add to the prehistoric feel of the round's aesthetics. Of this OST, fans would cherish this music upon first hearing it. It was unabashedly hip and cheerful, even in the face of the game's slightly grittier tone, and SEGA of America did not like it. Not one bit. The soundtrack would be almost entirely scrapped for its Western release, under the idea that it sounded too similar to other electronic dance scores at the time. But really, I think they were just afraid the upbeat music would seem too juvenile to audiences. Westernization was such a common thing in the 90s, all these executives worrying that they'd lose numbers if their games didn't have a badass or in-your-face presentation as other advertised products. A new soundtrack was composed by Spencer Nilsson and David Young, akin to Nilsson's previous works on other SEGA games at the time. These new tracks are certainly more ambient, less in your face, and more like they are trying to build a gloomy atmosphere. And while they're not as listenable, they're still pretty good. The intro and ending tracks were replaced with another song, Sonic Boom, performed by the all-female band Pastiche. In all honesty, the song's not that bad. It's more mellow, but it's still upbeat and with some magnificent vocals, and it's just as nostalgic to me as the game's original soundtrack. I like that the jazz trio were even allowed to add their vocal flares to some of the level tracks too. Amy Rose will be proud. Most American fans, primarily on release, were not aware of the soundtrack changes, but some certainly eyed the Japanese version that came out 2 months before, that's for sure. And when the US one came out after the fact, there was a near immediate backlash against the soundtrack change. Some felt it ruined the original vibe the game was going for, others were okay with it but were vocal about the changes. Personally, I think both are good in their own ways, and neither of them are the true superior version. Surprisingly, Nilsson was somewhat calm about the whole thing, with a well thought out response basically saying, "There's 2 soundtracks to enjoy, this is only a video game, sometimes critics can be overly callous." For fans, it didn't help matters that SEGA of America were making other decisions that just confused the hell out of them, mainly trying to market for the recently released Sonic the Hedgehog TV show by saying that the girl that follows Sonic around is Sally Acorn, a totally different character than Amy. Anyone can see that. This was seen as a bizarre marketing ploy, and it got corrected in any future ports and re-releases. Both soundtracks have been brought back in the form of albums, vinyls, and official remixes, so despite all that, both soundtracks have seen their fair share of praise in retrospect. I mean, Sonic Boom was even remixed by Cash Cash and fricking Crush 40. This is the part where I usually talk about the level's music individually, but there's like 25 plus songs here to go through, and the video itself is long enough as is, so I will simply talk about some of the tracks I thought did a good job with their dopamine-inducing vibes. Palm Tree Panic's music makes for a very good first impression, showing off just how naturally upbeat the OST is, especially with their voice sampling. It really showcases it well, and I love the rendition in the Good Future. The past theme always made me think of walking down an old English village in pouring rain. Don't ask, that was just my mindset as a kid. And the Bad Future one, golly, as distressing as it sounds, the way it mixes the flute tune and cheering sounds into a dreary beat, before dropping the sickest beats one could ever hear in a Sonic game, it's just... The Good Future music in Collision Chaos. Holy crap, this one fricking sends me heavensward, bro. It's catchy, and the atmosphere is fantastic, and is probably one of the most remixed tracks by fans. Tidal Tempest isn't bad, it's perhaps the most atmospheric of the Japanese tracks, but it still carries an enchanting beat, and that drum sound can motivate you through any underwater labyrinth. I also like the Good Future music here, being a more whimsical rendition of the present theme. You could make a rap out of it. The Bad Future music is like this chaotic electronic merry-go-round of mechanical beeps and boops. It's ruinously effective, in my personal opinion. The Good Future music for Quartz Quadrant is also very nice and relaxing, with synthetic trumpet and air horn instruments to back it up. Its Bad Future theme is also chaotically catchy, like both at the same time. It really gets your blood pumping. The past version of Wacky Workbench is perhaps my second favourite track in the game. It just oozes fun, and the different instruments and the drum snare sound really adds a lot. A good distraction from being electrocuted. Stardust Speedway is full of jazzy beats and record scratches with some funky as heck vocals. It fits very well with the level, and I especially love how they incorporate a fricking alarm horn and somehow makes it the coolest thing ever, especially in the Bad Future music. Metallic Madness? I have maybe a controversial opinion incoming, but I like the US tracks here more. Now hear me out. I still love the beat here, as well as the distorted vocals, and how the Bad Future version includes these silly laughing sounds like in Robotnik's boss battles, and also how it includes its own lyrics, presumably from Dr. Robotnik's perspective, as a malicious twist on You Can Do Anything's lyrics. The boss music itself is extremely funky, with some admittedly narmy vocal performances, but I'll be damned if it isn't a bop. It's the most upbeat boss music the Good Doctor has ever had attributed to him, and it appears more like he's inviting you to a dance rather than die. Final Fever is its own level of narm, having an opera singer wail on with MIDI trumpet sounds, though it fits rather well as a final boss when it starts whipping out the pipe organs and synthesized violins. It's like something straight out of Sonic Adventure. The speed-up music makes you feel like you're on caffeine, with an even more bouncy remix of You Can Do Anything, which is also used for the Invincibility theme, but with a heroic electronic rendition of the tune. The Game Over music sounds like it's a band being sent to hell, and the special stage music is as catchy as it is admittedly stress-inducing as you run across the flashy landscapes. Honestly, a large majority of the Japanese soundtrack is a very good listen, and I would highly recommend to anyone wanting some motivational music to listen to. The US soundtrack doesn't have that many personal bangers, but there are a couple of notable tracks, such as Palm Tree Panic. Yep, I may have heard this first from my first playthrough of the game, but it's extraordinarily catchy, and those guitar segments are something to behold. It's like a hecking samba going on. I also like the effect of the future versions of the tracks, where they mix humming machinery noises with African-sounding chants. The boss theme of this game, I won't say fits per se, what with this one evil laugh sound repeated at different pitches, but it is the kind of theme that you would think accompanied somebody who turned the future of these zones into a polluted wasteland. It makes Dr. Robotnik sound like a real piece of work. The present title Tempest theme is probably my favourite US track. It's incredibly relaxing to contrast with the game's dreaded underwater level, and the vocals singing a hopeful tune really helps encourage you through it. The Bad Future music is similarly lax, with its gloomy yet still intriguing tune. Hearing those droning electric guitar chords as you dive deeper into the mechanical pits is not something that would ever leave your brain. You can say the same for a lot of the Bad Future tracks really, like Quad's Quadrants music being a mix of menacing electric guitars, eerie tambourines and computer noises. It's a very oppressive mood overall. Wacky Workbench Present is also one of my favourite US tracks, for just how positive it sounds. There's nothing like listening to this as you zip across the zone and navigate your way forward. The Bad Future music is just as funky, and even I find myself head-bopping to it often. Eat my ass. No. Stardust Speedway's theme is a trifle more atmospheric than the fricking party in Funko Pop Town the original one was. Through its use of synths, it really adds to the feeling that the end of the game is swiftly approaching. And the Bad Future music, I also really like. It's equally mellow and full of electronic swings, but fits more in line with the gameplay part of the level rather than the race at the end, at least in my opinion. Like, sorry, nothing can beat the race in the Japanese version. Metallic Madness in the US version has the better final level theme, according to this dork here. It's incredibly ominous sounding with haunting, warbling sounds as the track continuously starts to audibly deteriorate as it goes on, adding to the theme of Robotnik's conquered territories becoming more run down over time. I don't think there's a single Metallic Madness US theme that I don't enjoy. The special stage theme this time around is a calm, careful sounding beat to get you focused. It's perhaps the most serious sounding bonus music ever, but it's still a chillaxing listen. Ooh, I think that's enough on the music. Goodness knows how long I've been droning on. I hope you're staying hydrated, buddy. Anywho, let's talk about the characters met and enemies confronted. The cool and popular Sonic the Hedgehog is still his usual self, minus the new additions to his moveset. He's on his own this time, so no Fox Psychics are here to join him on his journey. He's got a couple of new animations in this game, including sprites for him standing on spinning platforms, his super peel out, and of course that little finger waggle before he leaves in a huff. Being the first time the dude's been voiced in a game, his voice clips when leaving and getting a 1-up were provided by landscape designer Masato Nishimura. And of course, he has so much personality in the animated cinematics too. I love the way he just jumps around enemies and outsmarts them like they're nothing. He's so cheeky. Amy Rose makes her debut here, and is a side character who Sonic sees regularly on his adventure. This cute and mystical enjoyer of fortune-telling follows the player character around the end of Zone 1, giving him deadly cuddles that you can't get free from unless you jump. Too bad Sonic doesn't reciprocate her advances. She does reappear later to get kidnapped and rescued, and isn't seen again until the final boss is defeated and during the ending cutscene. Dr. Robotnik, Eggman in Japan, takes centre stage alongside the Hedgehog, as him and Sonic's rivalry spans that of entire timelines. Even when he's not around, his influence is felt throughout the game due to him being the one to place teleporters in the past and cause a total post-apocalyptic nightmare in the future. I've heard theories about this phenomenon, where the futures are all destroyed and decrepit, so much so that even the badniks are looking worse for wear, suggesting that Robotnik's empire is bound to fail due to its own shortcomings. Though the counter-argument, and the one I stand by, is that the big bad doesn't really care how decrepit his conquered territories look, as long as he has control over them. Poor badniks though. Robotnik's sprites use the same palette as in Sonic 1, though his Eggmobile and posture while riding it are different, showing him hunched over with a more wrinkled, bald head, and even his eyes showing behind his glasses somewhat. Not to mention the flying pod itself looking more wide and imposing than before. His boss mechs are also bigger and more threatening, for the most part. The EGG HVC 001 is my favourite, being a full-on battle walker with bumpers for arms. It makes for an easy if fun boss battle with the Doctor, even though you can clearly choose the boss by hiding on the side before it lands. It goes down easily with a couple of hits, and its name is theorised to be a jab at Nintendo and the Famicom, because their model number was also HVC 001. In one of the prototypes it had pincers for hands instead of bumpers. The animals make an appearance, although curiously they don't pop out of destroyed badniks in this game. They appear in the background of present and past zones if the robot transporter was destroyed, and always appear in the good future areas. Their appearances also vary depending on the zone, and there are also new variants of the animals, including robins, sheep, and a variety of unnamed birds and fish. Metal Sonic is quite menacing in his first appearance, being the silent, taunting copycat, also found throughout the game in cutscenes and holograms of himself. His appearance, like every enemy in the game, was meant to be reminiscent of CGI graphics to give him that sleek, intimidating look, and while he has red eyes in the artwork, they turned out white in the final game and in concept images. I like all the moves he has in his racing segment while Sonic outruns Robotnik's laser beam. From Metal's Ring Spark Shield, where he periodically surrounds himself with electricity, or the V Maximum Overdrive attack where he dashes forward if left too far behind. Once he loses the race, a door is slammed in his face and he flies off screen, much like how Sonic does when he loses a life. What a way to go. The badniks in this game are distinct from any others in that they are all based on insects. They also have a smooth, colourful look to them, once again harkening back to the CGI influences, and I like that most of them have faces hidden in their metallic shells with white sclera, much like Metal Sonic in this installment. Instead of containing animals, the badniks in this game are all powered by Little Planet flowers. They all appear as orbs of light within a robot, but once popped open, it falls to the ground and forms into a full-grown flower. Its design varies depending on what round you're in. The capsules at the end also contain a bunch of these flowers. All badniks have a slightly destroyed variant that either attack slower or are less of a hassle to deal with. They appear in bad future zones, but some also appear prematurely in the present timeline. Badniks in this game have Japanese-sounding names, most of which was taken from the game's code in re-releases, and they are as follows. My apologies if I mispronounce any. Mosky, also called Kamukas, are mosquito badniks which zip down at you if you're below them, lodging themselves into the ground in the process. Antons are this game's version of the motorbug and just roll back and forth. They have arms, but they can't slap you or anything. Taimababor is the name of a fricking stink bug. They act like crab meats in that they stop to launch a pair of projectiles that arc downward. Patabatas flap through the air. They are only a threat if you happen to be sprung into the air while they're overhead. Tagatagas are giant water bugs which have a different attack pattern depending on the rounds they are found in. They either hop out from under bridges or swim underwater and charge at you if you're close, shooting out spikes after they do so. Gar is the name of a moth badnik which simply floats forward after coming out of hiding. They drop non-lethal sparkling dust. Kamakamas are mantis robots that send their pincers forward, kinda like how the slicers do in Sonic 2. They can be deflected with a spin attack. Tentu are hovering ladybug badniks, which slowly fly about and drop spiky mines on the ground. Yagor is the name of a crayfish badnik that charges at you if spotted in their underwater patrols. Tombo is a type of dragonfly robot that simply flies back and forth. Amanbo are tiny water striders which spit out even smaller projectiles. Nordos are slow-moving snail badniks which act as roadblocks with spikes on their backs. Kemuse is an upgrade of the caterpillar badniks from Sonic 1, just with undulating movements and the lack of their segments flying off. Sasadi are scorpions on wheels with a gun for a tail. They move back and forth and will shoot a projectile if Sonic is spotted. Kumors are spider badniks which can hop into the air and shoot out immobilizing cobwebs from their abdomens. Bata peons are grasshopper badniks with springs attached to them and are often seen in groups. Poor bees are a more menacing looking buzz bomber model with a predominantly yellow and black colour scheme. There are two types, ones that shoot projectiles down at Sonic, and those that swing maces around on chains. Mino Muse is a type of bagworm badnik, which drop down from the ceiling and protrude their spikes. Semis are cicada badniks that are rarely seen. They fly forward slowly and drop spiky balls that explode on the floor. Canabuns are beetle badniks which constantly fly in and out of the background and foreground, but can be destroyed when on the same plane as you. Hortedu are firefly robots with a light bulb for a bum. They can cling to the screen for a little bit and transmit an electric current between each other if there's more than one of them. The ones in Metallic Madness Zone 3 are notable in being the first time badniks are required to be destroyed to progress. Kabesayara are creepy looking mosquito heads that move in a swarm, sending one of them in Sonic's direction if he is in close proximity. Dangos are pillbug badniks with the ability to roll into a ball and imitate Sonic's spin dash, bouncing the player character if struck during its rolling animation. They also come in two colours, depending on the round. Mecha Boos have buzzsaws on their faces and slowly roll back and forth. They cannot face any other direction. Scarabs are twitchy little guys with long appendages that often carry ring monitors. They send Sonic away in a spin dash animation if he graces their legs. Finally, Big Bombs are an upgrade of the regular bombs from Sonic 1. Both their size and their shower of projectiles are much bigger. Shall we top this off with talk of the game's legacy and ports and whatnot? It cannot be denied, the influence of Sonic CD can be felt throughout the series. Whether it be with the music, which helped give the series its rich musical identity with the game's upbeat, funky rhythms, or the exploration of environmentalism and industrialization, although one could argue that Sonic 1 already got the ball rolling on that. Its strange and exciting aesthetics indubitably influenced the vibes later games would provide, like Knuckles' Chaotix, which even had some of the same talent carried over, Sonic Heroes in its delightfully whimsical level aesthetics in the modern era, and Sonic Mania most certainly carried the torch that Sonic CD metaphorically started with its exciting visuals and music. Discussions online were also rampant with this initially elusive game. There was the matter of timeline placement too, which even today is a hot topic of debate among the fandom. Does Sonic CD take place in between Sonic 1 and 2, or after Sonic 3 and Knuckles? It makes sense on both fronts, really. Being set between Sonic 1 and 2 explains Tails' absence during gameplay, the game being developed after the release of Sonic 1, and Sonic not yet learning how to use the spin dash properly. Though the post-Sonic 3 idea gives context to the Super Peel-Out not being available until now. Makes sense as Robotnik's time travelling being a kind of last resort after his Death Egg plans evaporated. And the complete replication of Sonic in robot form, as previous Mecha Sonic models never made an appearance after Metal Sonic was introduced. Oshima himself doesn't consider Sonic CD as a sequel to either Sonic 1 or 2, though he sees Metal Sonic as an evolution of other Mecha Sonic types, and Yamaguchi has suggested that it might take place in between the two games. The timeline placement wouldn't be officially clarified until the Encyclopedia book and Sonic Origins, where its canon placement is indeed placed between 1 and 2. Most fans would disagree, but it's what the corporate side of SEGA says it is, I guess. There has been a couple of Easter eggs uncovered within the game, the most notable ones being the images hidden within the sound test menu. Entering specific codes would give you a full screen image with the last entered music playing alongside it. This includes cute Sonic art by Masahiro Sanpei, with the text translated as "You Are Cool" by Sanchanzu. One of the main male cast rapping and DJing, drawn by Hoshino. One of Tails next to his favourite sports car, presumably to tease the release of Sonic Drift, also drawn by his creator Yamaguchi. A bizarre Batman-inspired one drawn up by Takumi Miyake, the game's landscape and visual designer, and, most infamously, one with a Sonic in a Sonic with an uncanny humanoid face, repeated endlessly across a black void with the text translated as Infinite Fun SEGA Enterprises, Maze-in Picture. This scared the crap out of US players due to the already uncanny boss music playing over it, and for a time the word was erroneously translated as Margin, meaning demon or magic person in English, but really it was the nickname of Nishimura. It was also thought that this is the screen that pops up if you use a pirated version of the game, but it would quickly be debunked because Sonic CD doesn't have copy protection. The whole thing certainly gives me Sonic EXE vibes. Don't ask me to review it. There also exists a secret statue hidden in Zone 1 of Wacky Workbench. It is only accessible in the past and bad future timelines, and is housed in a kind of stone temple. Who is this angelic figure? The game never explains, and it exists as just this fun little Easter egg for the player to stumble into. It gives endless rings as a reward for finding it. Thank you, little planet goddess. In the bad future, it would seem that Robotnik got jealous of the deity and decided to replace her statue with one of his own likeness instead. Knocking it down causes a shower of bombs to drop on you. I would be beyond surprised if the visual aesthetics of Sonic CD didn't influence Sonic the Hedgehog the movie, a 2-episode anime OVA released 3 years later. While it's set in its own distinct world, and for the most part doesn't share many similarities to any game, I don't remember humanoid cat girls being around here. Not only does it include Metal Sonic as one of the main antagonists, but the way Sonic dashes around landscapes here is very reminiscent of Studio Junio's style. The general look of Planet Freedom is just as surreal and dreamlike as those from this game, especially the city at the beginning, and you tell me if Eggman City doesn't look similar to later levels in Sonic CD. Right? It does. Man, even years later I still get goosebumps watching this film and listening to that awesome soundtrack, especially with the Sonic and Metal Sonic showdowns. The game wished it had this kind of battle between the two. It's also where that funny Sonic quote originated from.
You might know everything I'm going to do, but that's not going to help you since I know everything you're going to do. Strange, isn't it?
Sonic CD has also been adapted multiple times in comic and manga form. Shogakukan produced an adaptation of the game. Fleetway's Sonic the Comic would have issue number 24 to 28 be a loose adaptation of this game. This version had Metal Sonic, here called Metallics, as the instigator of the plot. Archie Comics would adapt most of Sonic CD in their 25th issue, its first milestone issue. I still think Patrick Spaziante is super underrated as an artist when it comes to Sonic. I mean, look at this, all of this stuff was drawn by the same guy. He also mistakenly gave Metal Sonic a mouth. Let's kiss. The events of Sonic CD are also the focus of issue number 290 as the third part of the Genesis of a Hero storyline, which sadly ended production following this issue, and no, I'm definitely not still salty about that. The panels of classic Sonic and Amy meeting are beyond cute, and I like the story's attempts to explain some of the time travel mechanics, which must have been tricky as heck for the writing team. The only downgrade is that while I love this 2-page spread of the Metal Sonic race in Stardust Speedway, I hate how flat Metal himself looks. The colouring makes him look more two-dimensional than his cardboard holograms. The game would also find its fair share of ports, most of which brought attention to its existence through multi-platform compilation packs. There were Windows ports, of course, which were unique in that they included a loading screen for the time-travelling segments, and this version was emulated and carried over into Sonic Gems collection. For the 20th anniversary of the Sonic series, an enhanced remaster would come out, helmed by Christian Whitehead. You remember this guy, right? You know him. That's independent game developer and well-known user of the Sonic fan site Sonic Retro. He made the ports of previous Genesis games possible, and Sonic CD was actually the first one he would help remaster, as he had originally approached Sega with a demo after they announced that they were planning to port the game to iOS phones. His version used its own retro engine, and the company were so hecking impressed that they brought him on board to develop the port. This enhanced version was packed with a lot of bells and whistles to make it a more refined product, not only including widescreen support, an achievement system, multiple save slots with a level select, or the ability to swap between the original Japanese soundtrack or the US one, but also includes Tails as a playable character. The fact that he can fly around these maps makes exploration like 100 times more doable, and you really feel the developer's intent on making these zones so vast at the start. Tails also can't see Amy or Metal Sonic in gameplay, and he doesn't cause a game over if left idle for too long, because he's a good boy. Other important changes include the ability to pick what style of spin dash Sonic can use alongside the game's airspeed cap mechanic. There are certain sound effects added for more immersion, such as the flippers in Collision Chaos. The Egg Spinner's blades now spin at a smoother animation sequence. The Japanese intro and ending cutscenes also removed the lyrics, making them completely instrumental due to being unable to get the rights to the late Casey Rankin's lyrics, which would actually be restored in later ports, and many other small tweaks. There are also some unused elements that Whitehead hoped to use, most notably including an extra zone and true final boss battle. The latter was Final Fever, named after the final boss track, which would have been a time-skipping extra battle if you collected all the time stones. And the former was Desert Dazzle, an original round meant to replace the unused Ruins level. Both of these were dropped because SEGA wanted the port to be as close to the original as possible. Elements of Desert Dazzle would be reimagined during Whitehead's development of Sonic Mania, giving us the fan-favourite Mirage Saloon zone. The Retro Engine port would also be included in Sonic Origins and Sonic Origins Plus. The former left out Knuckles being a playable character, but included it in Sonic Origins Plus instead, along with letting you play as Amy Rose in her introductory game. Very nice. This version would not see many changes, except for the inclusion of the drop dash, which is a godsend when you're trying to easily travel across timelines, and I'm pretty sure it's not a glitch. And any character voice clips, be it from Sonic or Amy, being removed for some reason. I do really enjoy the enhanced animated cutscenes, the opening having been done by two fellow Sonic Retro members who were brought on board to help with the rest, along with the extra outro. Oh, and outbeating Metal Sonic as Amy is something I never knew I needed to see until today. It's so nice to control her now after the games kind of forgot about her playable character status. In addition to ports, fans have continuously been inspired by this game and made the usual ROM hacks and fan games. There's so many, but off the top of my head, Sonic Time Twisted is Sonic CD if it took its concepts in an even more ambitious direction, and I mean unexpectedly so. Azanari's remaster concept that was uploaded recently, Sonic Overture, though you can say it's more inspired by Sonic 1's level design, and that Sonic Freedom game showcased during Sage 2020. That anime opening inspired everyone, it seems. Despite being a more elusive and little-known title in its first decade of release, Sonic CD is well celebrated for its presentation, astounding visuals, and its plethora of audio tracks and music. It may not have used the SEGA CD to its fullest, as some critics at the time had said, but it was just so unique, so creative, so Sonic, it rose high above its competition during its original release, and, in my opinion, stands the test of time even with somewhat dated sampling at times. The explorative elements were similarly praised, but also came with its fair share of criticisms. While the expanded environments allowed for good replay value, there were also difficulties achieving the time warp properly due to how cluttered and twisted the level design was. Clearing the game 100% was somewhat difficult, but not as much as in Sonic 1, that's for certain. To the fanbase, it's a hotly contested sequel game, what with its bleak tone and mood and the implication of planet-wide collapse, though most can agree it's still fun. Infinite fun, you might say. But what's my 2 pennies on the game? What do I personally think? Well, it's a great game, and an even greater one when there's multiple characters better suited for exploring its multi-layered playgrounds. While the decreased speed can hinder the experience somewhat, it's still an absolute joyride through and through, and I would highly recommend it to any fan who enjoys a good platforming game. It is well earned of an A rank. Maybe not as grand as Sonic 2, but still really high on my favourites list for the fantastic journey it delivers.
It's not going to help you, since you're going to help you.
In 1992, SEGA found themselves in quite the predicament. The success of the first Sonic the Hedgehog game on the Genesis was monumentous in showing the gaming world their capabilities as a company, but in its shadow, it was evident things were bubbling under the surface. From multiple games being developed at once with strict deadlines, to the main programmer quitting the company, and the stressful working conditions teams had to endure while making a bigger, grander sequel to their popular platforming game. Amid all of this corporate chaos and management, One team would, through blood, sweat and tears, come together despite their language barrier and vastly opposing work ideologies. And they would create one of the greatest video games of all time. The best way I would describe Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Genesis would be, it's twice as much as before. Twice the effort of graphics, roughly double the length in levels, and twice the amount of stress it would take to complete the buggering thing. All of this had to come from somewhere, but was the game's hectic development time well spent in the end? I mean, obviously it was. That's evidence just from a glance. And I enjoyed this game to bits as a young Holmes, so follow me if you wish through this whirlwind of a game history as we experience the highs and lows of the fabulous Sonic 1 sequel. Many things that affected this game came about while the previous one was still under development, which we only know through interviews with the developers or in the released Simon Y prototype of the game. Starting from the beginning, frequent SEGA collaborator Mark Cerny, a game designer and programmer for previous titles such as Kid Chameleon, would form the SEGA Technical Institute, a company in the United States that would assist others in his line of work and receive special training from those on SEGA's Japanese team. No doubt inspired by how well Sonic 1 came out, that game's designer, Hirokazu Yasuhara, would join the STI a year after he was offered the position. And he would be accompanied by another, had Mr. Yuji Naka not up and left before the first game's release. He said it was due to dissatisfactions and financial issues with the company, but after being convinced to join the Institute by Cerny, it's clear it was more like he felt SEGA was too strict and critical of his creative drives. They also gave him a higher salary than SEGA did. His programming talent was well respected. So with the two creative heads of Sonic reunited and bringing a lot of Sonic team members with them to the US, with the rest of the development team requested to stay behind and work on another Sonic game, Cerny would pitch the idea of a sequel to the higher-ups. SEGA would initially turn it down because sequels don't just come right after the first one, apparently, only to change their mind months later and demand one be made, like right fricking now. Your Japanese colleagues are already on their way, and you can say goodbye to the original schedule because, you have 11 months to make this. I would have crapped my pants if I heard that in 1991. The console wars were fascinating to experience as a consumer for sure, but think of all the peeps working their bums off trying to make this stuff. I truly feel bad for them. And not only that, but there was also the issues of cultural differences between the teams. The Japanese and American developers were on friendly enough terms, but given the crunch time they were given, the differing levels of experience between the two at handling such situations were extremely apparent. Cerny made this company for him and the others to receive sage advice from the Japanese side of SEGA, and here they were doing their best with their relatively inexperienced team of Americans, compared to the 4D chess-playing mega-chads of Japan, whose work ethic was built for these kinds of crunch conditions, as sad as it is to say. This team of 20, with at least 100 other hard-working contributors, would work tirelessly through months of development, the Japanese side doing all-nighters and even sleeping in their office cubicles for peak commitment. It was rough as heck, dude. On the creative side of things, with Cerny acting as art director, the team would have to work with the game's limited colour palette, even if it was an improvement from Sonic 1. Only 64 colours and shades could be displayed at once, though they had the assistance of Riko Kodama, an artist on the first game, to help deal with the limitations. The team of Westerners were working in tandem with the Japanese designers, yet there were more hurdles for them to jump through, from the Americans not understanding Japanese, to Mr. Yuji Naka being extremely difficult to work with thanks to his superiority complex and wanting to personally oversee development, to main artist and level designer Yasushi Yamaguchi doing double duty on designing his zones and reworking the other side's pixels and level art to ensure that they were the same quality. It got so overwhelming that Cerny would leave either halfway through or towards the end of development, the rising tensions between the two sides making things pretty ugly for him. Among the Americans, they felt they were underappreciated and were furious when their contributions and designs were axed during development by the more professional Japanese side, who in turn felt like they were almost babysitting these guys due to how way more committed they were to make a final product. Vitriol was also aimed at SEGA of America too, because they simultaneously did not have confidence in this team-up, and yet betted everything on this sequel game. Despite the differences in output, the American team would be the MVPs towards the end of development. Their bug-checking process was an absolute godsend, which earns them a lot of credit from the Japanese side. On the game itself, the story and zones were originally much more vast, both in number and level of creativity. The plot was originally about the game's villain, Dr. Robotnik, going back in time and altering Mobius's history and leaving the present in a dystopian state. That, and the idea of visiting zones in different time periods would be scrapped, clearly too ambitious for an already rushed product. Some of the zones from different time periods would be utilised, albeit in a new context, which I'll go into when we get there, but several zones would be lost if not for them catching fans' interest after the fact. I'll go into these cut levels real quick with the animated mock-ups from Brenda Cook's video game art portfolio, link in the description. These zone concepts were Wood Zone, a dense forest where Sonic would run across giant trees and branches. The idea of it was theorised to be a past version of Metropolis Zone due to the use of conveyor belts, but according to the map sketches, it was planned as the present-day version of Casino Night Zone. Sand Shower Zone, or Sabaku Zone, meaning desert. Probably one of the more beloved of the unused levels, and only existing as a single image. This one took place in a desert filled with cacti and had both above and underground areas to explore. There's hints in the prototype that the music would have been Casino Night Zone's multiplayer theme, and this zone is not to be confused with Dust Hill Zone, a completely separate cut zone that would have been Mystic Cave Zone's alternate present. Rock World Zone, or Snowy Winter Zone, or just Winter Zone, would have been the past version of Sand Shower Zone had it reached fruition. It used a snowy blue version of that tile set, and through the game's prototypes, it is assumed to have used what would be Sky Chase Zone's music. Cyber City Zone, known more popularly as Genocide City Zone for when the Japanese side were spitballing more dangerous level names. Originally planned as its own level set after Metropolis Zone with its own graphical look, it was instead merged with that zone as the game's only Act 3. While we don't know how the level looks, the concept art and tile set would inspire the aesthetic of Sonic's Spinball's level, The Machine. The music used in the prototype is Chemical Plant Zone's theme, but it would have undoubtedly had its own unique theme had it stuck around. And lastly, Hidden Palace Zone, no doubt the most well-known cut level of Sonic 2. Removed late in development due to memory limitations, late enough that it was still used in promotional images for the game, this zone is a cavernous area filled with sparkling green gems and structures, including a giant gem at the end that will allow Sonic to turn into Super Sonic, following the acquisition of all the Chaos Emeralds. Since it was mostly unfinished, it required debug mode to move around the map. For those that don't know, a debug mode is an in-game developer tool, mostly used to edit level layouts and test the functionality of all the assets and stuff. The prototype leaks and the game's debug mode helped fans figure out its different badniks, a mysterious Tails 1-up monitor, which would be more frequent in even earlier demos, and it was overwhelmingly agreed to by fans that it would have used the somber music track which can only be heard in the game's sound test menu in the final game. Various betas and the game's remaster instead use Mystic Cave Zone's multiplayer theme instead. The cut levels had to make way for something, and that something came with a whole lot of brainstorming ideas. The importance of them would vary, from a feature where Sonic could take damage if he crashed against a wall while running, to experimenting with pseudo 3D graphics based on Naka's tech demo, to a multiplayer mode where two players could compete in races against each other. Naka's impressive programming allowed for two different game screens to appear over each other, even if the graphical fidelity took a hit. This was an idea saved from the original Sonic the Hedgehog, but their skills were more advanced and fine-tuned now, so they could properly implement it. To coincide with a two-player racing mode, much like the Japanese team during Sonic 1's development, a contest was held at the Institute to create a companion character for the Blue Hedgehog, one with a more cute and rookie look to them, with Kitsune from Urusei Yatsura serving as an example. A couple of design choices were thought up, including a turtle character named Boomer, and Yamaguchi would pitch his idea, Miles Power, a little fox boy with two tails and a deep admiration for Sonic, with inspiration from Maio of the Phantasy Star games. The name was meant to be a play on miles per hour, a unit of measurement for speed, with the surname shortly changed to Prower after much discussion about how overpowered it made the character sound. Marketing director Al Nilsson and product manager Madeline Stroder at SEGA of America felt the name wouldn't be as marketable in the West and would suggest Tails as his name. Nilsson thought up a whole backstory for the kid to convince the developers, and while Yamaguchi was initially miffed at the name change, they settled on having Miles Prower being the character's legal name, with Tails as his more well-known nickname. So, add Tails to the list of characters having their names changed to nicknames thanks to localization. On the sound side, the music was initially developed in-house at SEGA of America before their tracks were rejected for their supposedly poor compositions, and SEGA instead brought back Masato Nakamura. The dude had reached peak popularity following the release of the first game, and thus had a notably increased asking price, but he went to work at the start of development with only the game's concept art to go off of. He worked around the console's limited sound capabilities, all while producing his 1992 album at the same time too. The size of this guy's balls were huge. The Institute allowed full control and let him work freely, creating a soundtrack that, in his words, showed progress like the fun and excitement akin to the Indiana Jones sequels. After the game's release, he would even make a homage to the developers in his album with an alternate version of the game's ending theme. So with all that chaos, scrapped content that is still being unearthed today, and the high stakes of polishing it up until the very last moment, things finally ended. The game's source code would be copied, flown back to Japan by 2 staff members on separate planes, because they weren't going to risk losing their long-laboured video game. Competition was still afoot. And then the games would come out. The North American and European release date, Tuesday, November 24th, 1992, was marketed as Sonic Tuesday after being available in all stores on the same day. In Japan, the release date would be 3 days earlier on November 21st. I guess Sonic Saturday doesn't quite roll off the tongue. Like previous Sonic games, including the Master System ones, SEGA hired Greg Martin to make cover art. The international box art for the game is iconic, just having the 2 main characters standing smugly. With the additional visualage of a giant Eggman grimacing and grasping from behind a giant number 2 with the iconic Green Hill Zone checkerboard look, it's simple but effective. Martin's shading really sells it for me, giving the box art a distinct 90s look. And while Sonic's quills look more like spikes added to the back of his head rather than a natural part of his body, it's nonetheless an appealing look to Western audiences. Just don't imagine how he looks from the front, or else you'll get hedgy nightmares. The Japanese box art was illustrated by Akira Watanabe, a veteran who made the art for many a SEGA game, including previous Sonic ones. The dynamic columns with the jagged edges and the bombastic typography is certainly a vibe. And the rest, that is to say the game, was history. It proved to be extremely popular, even with its denominators, which I'll save for the legacy section of this video. But what of the stuff that made it into the game proper? Was the developers' efforts all for naught? Let's take a look at that gameplay. The gist of it is that Sonic 2 plays very much like the first game on the Genesis, with a fair number of changes to allow for a smoother experience. There are only 2 acts per zone, save for a couple of late game levels, cutting down on repetitive level themes. Navigating the zones is much less tiring than before and allows the level design to be fully fleshed out as 2 explorable obstacle courses, rather than 3 mostly straightforward acts like in the first game. Sonic used to have a cap that made it so you could run at high speeds, though only so far that you couldn't breeze through the levels recklessly and break the game's engine. In Sonic 2, that cap was lifted, allowing you to run ludicrously to your heart's content. It is extremely exhilarating at times when the camera literally loses track of Sonic for a moment. Players were also introduced to the Spin Dash, a new form of attack and navigation to the Blue Hedgehog's moveset, allowing him to rev up into a ball form and let loose along the ground. The number of times you hit the button makes the launch all the more powerful, and even if it goes at max speed after like 3 clicks, it's still really satisfying to hear the rev sound increase in pitch with every button mash. This boy is powerful. It's a move shared between both playable characters, so it's not like either of them are at a disadvantage in 2-player mode or anything. Oh right, so Tails. You have the option on playing as either Sonic, Tails, or as Sonic with Tails strapped to him forever and ever. The latter is fun in many ways, and usually the one that I pick whenever I play it. Tails does his best to mimic your movements, but as a result of him being controlled with AI and being more of an accessory to your adventure, that makes him completely invincible. He may appear to lose a life like Sonic would and fall off screen, but he always respawns and descends from the top shortly after separation. One fun option that they literally did not have to do, but is awesome anyway, is having the Player 2 controller plugged in, and another player could control Tails separately. I actually have fond memories of letting my little sister play as him, or just messing around with her in debug mode. The only downside is that since bosses have no hitbox immediately when they are flashing from being struck, is that if Tails hits the boss, then Sonic may pass through him the next time he attacks him, leading to many an infuriating death. Playing as Tails does not give you the ability to fly in the original game, despite that being the reason you'd probably want to play as him. The only big difference is his appearance and his slightly shorter hitbox, though there aren't many situations where that would be useful. The start screen has changed completely this time around. Instead of the zone name with a blue circle set against a black background, now 3 colours slide in, with the zone and act number showing in a different font. Like before, the player has only this text and the background music to get a first impression of the stage they're in, before the colours and the zone text zoom away. It certainly makes the level transitions more lively and eye-popping. Many returning aspects from the first game are unchanged. You still collect rings to take an extra hit, and 50 of them are required to enter special stages, all tried and true. Item boxes still appear in the form of monitors, with a few notable differences and updates. The 1-ups now show up as either Sonic or Tails, depending on who you're playing as, and the shield effect now appears as a blue bubble with outwardly rippling white circles. There also exist some monitors exclusive to the 2-player mode, such as Player Swap, which causes a flash of light to appear and swaps the race's locations on the map, Eggman marks, which display Robotnik's smiling mug that inflicts damage on you when broken, unless of course the player is invincible by the time of hitting it, or Random, which grants the player a randomly selected power-up. The Eggman mark's unfinished graphic in Sonic 1's data implies that was meant to appear there first. Additionally, the random item boxes can be adjusted in the game's menu to either have every item in its selection or just the player swap for maximum chaos. Both yellow and red springboards return as a way to traverse stages, with this game introducing ones that are hidden in the ground, ones that appear diagonally aligned to terrain, and a new variety that are useful, albeit finicky, jump panels which work like mini ramps. Spikes return as a very common obstacle in this game, appearing in almost every zone. Their design is a little different than in Sonic 1, where they are bunched together in sets of 4 rather than 3, unlike those dragon's teeth in the first game. They are also freed from the spike glitch, something I neglected to mention. In the original release of the first game, spikes didn't give Sonic mercy invincibility after taking damage from them, so he would die instantly upon being twice struck. The omission of that alone makes them much less dangerous in this game. Boosters are a new element to the series, granting the playable character an incredible boost of speed comparable to that of a red spring. Like the seesaws in Sonic 1, they are confined to only one zone, but will be a consistent level element in future games. Speaking of seesaws, they also only appear in one zone, and act like they did in the first game, with Sonic having to step over to the other side after landing to launch himself at higher trajectories. Instead of a spiky ball as a counterweight, there is instead an invulnerable robot head. Goalposts appear at the end of Act 1 of a zone. There's no giant ring attached to them this time, they're only there to herald the end of a stage and give the player time to relax after a potentially tough journey. The plate features updated art of Robotnik, Sonic doing his funky little peace sign, or if you play as the fox, of Tails looking into the camera like it's an episode of The Office. Star posts now have an actual star print on them, as well as a more detailed design overall. They twirl and make a ding-dong noise when the player passes under them, and if 50 rings are in your possession, a circle of stars will materialise above it for a few seconds. These are the entrance to this game's special zone. The gimmick of the special stages here would set the precedent for all others going forward. These 3-dimensional half-pipe courses are where you get the Chaos Emeralds in Sonic 2, running through it as either character or both of them as you collect enough rings to get past 3 checkpoints, avoiding exploding spiky balls, yelling at Tails for making you lose rings, and collecting the emerald at the end with the familiar glittering jingle playing to signify your success. Upon being booted from the trippy zone, your rings are depleted, all item boxes on the map are reset, and any star post before that point will be activated, so you have to be tactical if you're aiming to get the emeralds early. Unlike the first game, where the courses would change to the next one, regardless or not if you got the shiny rock at the end, the ones in Sonic 2 have to be completed one after the other, with the difficulty increasing with every Chaos Emerald, and coloured similarly to boot. Upon collecting all of them, in a climactic fashion, the game tells you can now be Super Sonic, the next level of power, and by God is that correct in that statement. Super Sonic is a temporary transformation that can be activated when collecting 50 gold rings and tapping the jump button, allowing him complete invincibility, extremely fast running speed and increased jumping height, and the innate ability to look cool while doing absolutely anything. He still dies if he drops into a pit, gets hit by a crusher, or runs out of air underwater, and the ring count slowly depletes until it reaches 0. At that point, the effect will wear off, and the same happens when reaching the end of a stage. It's most certainly a homage to the Super Saiyan transformation from Dragon Ball Z, of which SEGA were thankfully not sued for. Getting all the Chaos Emeralds also nets you a slightly different ending after defeating the final boss. While still formulaic like the first game, the story is nonetheless a big step up in scale. After getting a vision of West Side Island for saving South Island from Dr. Robotnik's tyranny, Sonic the Hedgehog heads on over there on his personal plane, the Tornado. Around the same time, a two-tailed fox cub named Miles Prower, often the subject of bullying due to his 2 pairs of tails, runs into the visiting hedgehog, and he inspires him to be just as cool as he is, with the kid realising to his surprise that he can keep up with the blue boy by twirling his tails behind him like a propeller, also allowing him flight. However, Sonic's not the only one who arrived. Dr. Robotnik and his Badnik horde are also here to muck everything up, having followed Sonic here while he was out flying his plane. The dude is once again searching for the 6 Chaos Emeralds, including the secret 7th one only spoken of in Legends. He's not just collecting them for the sake of it this time either, as he has a giant space fortress to use them in, known as the Death Egg, a clear homage to the orbital space station from Star Wars Episode 4, the Death Star, just with a big moustache on it and 2 holes that look like eyes. Sonic rushes in to clear the bad guy out of the conquered zones, with Tails tagging alongside him. They fight Robotnik at every turn, all the way up to his operations on West Side Island. With the place soon freed from his forces, the two take to the skies in Sonic's plane, piloted by Tails. However, the tornado gets shot out of the sky before Sonic lands on Robotnik's warship, leaving the Fox out of commission until later on, where with the power of a rocket strapped to the bottom, Tails assists Sonic one more time in tailing the big bad straight to his space station. Can Mobians just breathe in space? A couple of surprises await him there, including the Doctor's final death trap, the giant Death Egg robot. After a tense fight, Sonic's victory causes a chain reaction explosion, fading out as he flees for his life from the blast. In a somber series of cutscene images, a new thing for this series, Tails and the animals see the giant explosion from below, which wipes out the entire sky, and it would seem that Sonic will not be returning from his space trip. A worried Tails soon hops into the tornado, having a premonition that his new friend is in need of rescuing. And he would be right. Sonic falls through the clouds to his doom, only for Tails to fly in and save him. The regular ending has Sonic land and a flock of flickies fly alongside them, before the two pose for the camera in an ending shot. In the good ending, Sonic doesn't really need saving, and Tails and the flickies meet him in the sky after following his supersonic transformation in the distance. If you were playing as Tails, it is instead Sonic that flies in to rescue him, and this is why I rather prefer the regular ending more. Tails following Sonic throughout the game as a tag-along kid, then proving his expertise as a trusted pilot, really has him grow on the player. And the rescue at the end as the music swells triumphantly with a touching melody is just the icing on the cake. These two really make for a great duo, and this game certainly sold me on that. While we're on the subject of music, how well did our accomplished composer dude do on his return to Sonic? With double the ROM size, all of these zones have their own quirks. Starting from the beginning, there's Emerald Hill Zone, West Side Island's answer to Green Hill Zone. It's a tropical area filled with lush plants, waterfalls, and glistening jewels in its soil and trees, and stretching into the distance stands a massive flower field with a sparkling ocean sat behind round hills. The parallax scrolling effect in the background is really eye-catching for a first-time player, and one detail I appreciate is in the distance, the more you progress through the zone, the closer you come by another island beyond the ocean, possibly South Island. Other than loop-de-loops, caverns, and other familiar set pieces, this zone introduces corkscrews for the first time, which require you to run across them. Jumping simply causes you to fall through them. The music is peak Sonic for me, extremely positive and encouraging while giving quite the thrill ride. The level's 2-player modes track isn't too bad either, I must stress. At the end of the zone, there is a boss battle against Dr. Robotnik in his egg drillster. The second level is Chemical Plant Zone, a massive factory filled with pipes, weird blue blobs, and giant lakes of purple water like in Act 3 of Scrap Brain Zone from the first game. Here it's called Mega Mac, an unpleasant toxic liquid specifically designed to counter the blue blur, though in-game it acts the same as water. Robotnik must have been taking notes while being chased in Labyrinth Zone. Act 2 has this segment where you're locked in a vertical area, only utilising tricky platforms to climb towards the exit and avoid rising water that makes your movement slower, which is one hell of a difficulty spike for first time players. Hell, even veterans probably get the shivers when reaching this point. Not me though, as in the play footage I recorded of the game, I never even touched the surface of the sodding water. Skill issue! The original version of this zone was originally the future version of Emerald Hill Zone, before being changed to one of Dr. Robotnik's other facilities on West Side Island. The aesthetic is quite a shake-up to the formula of more natural-looking locations leading into industrialised areas, and the music is just as foreboding, though still with a funky tune. The boss of this zone is the Egg Poison. Level 3 is Aquatic Ruin Zone, a dense forest containing ancient ruins submerged in water. The bottom of the map contains underwater caves and traps, but the upper half has just as many obstacles waiting in the flora. Most of the traps there seem to be natural, and others were clearly installed recently with Robotnik's face slapped onto them. The music here is befitting of a perilous forest. There's a dog in there as well! And it is interesting to note that the name for this zone in preview magazines was Neo Green Hill Zone, possibly connected to the unused time travel plot. The boss for this zone is the Egg Hammer. Casino Night Zone is next, a sprawling neon-lit cityscape littered with casino lights, pinball flippers, and the ever-present bumpers that bounce you around. Spring Yard Zone may have been pinball inspired, but this one, with its colourful lights and slot machines, certainly cements the amusement park aesthetic that the series would often reuse. The slots, like with real gambling, are hit or miss. There are some that simply add points to your score, while the big ones give you a varying amount of rings depending on what they land on. Or they can take away all your hard-earned rings when the Robotnik pictures line up. It's uncertain if this zone is another Robotnik base, or if this is where the animals go to gamble on West Side Island, but the various flashing decorations with Sonic and Miles' names on them imply that the latter is true. Robotnik just tampered with the slots, I guess. The theme of this zone is very relaxed and jazzy, quite an achievement for the console's audio tracks. And this does feel like a place to take a breather, what with the limited enemy encounters and the only severe obstacles being crushing platforms. The original concept for this zone was supposed to be a dystopian future for the unused wood zone, and the level's background and tileset were originally much brighter before going for the calm night setting. The boss of this zone is the Egg Claw. Hilltop Zone, a tall mountain range that reaches the clouds above West Side Island. It's notable for its multicoloured mountains and canyons in the background, its pits of lava, as well as its pine trees and reusing the tile set of Emerald Hill Zone, a carryover from when this was planned to be the past version of that level. Lava pits are found throughout the zone, as are gondolas to carry you over them, seesaws for vertical travel, loop-de-loops with breakable floors, and spike-filled caverns that contain magma which rises and falls. The lava effect in this zone, compared to that in Marble Zone, is a little more fluffy than before. The music here is very relaxed, in line with the familiar aesthetic and mostly non-lethal outside areas. Dr. Robotnik at the end of Act 2 pits you against the Egg Scorcher Mark II, a flame-spewing submersible and an upgrade to the one he used in Marble Zone in the first game. Mystic Cave Zone, a massive cave with green and purple hues with an abandoned minecart system and a fair number of hidden traps and crushers. Here is where the kiddie gloves come off. This hollowed out mine has many an obstacle in its maze-like maps, and even the badniks get a little more tricky to deal with. The zone was originally conceived as a ruined present version of Emerald Hill Zone, and the music carries that ominous theme with sharp, grisly chords. Though, let's be honest, the multiplayer version of the track is way better. That backing track alone is such a bop. The boss of the zone is the Egg Digger, and following this stage, the player reaches the villain's territory. Oil Ocean Zone, a large oil refinery complex with a predominantly purple and gold colour palette. The polluted landscape is tricky to manoeuvre in thanks to the winding level structure, and the spinning fans, the vertical launching gas burn platforms, and the clanging spike obstacles are sure to keep you on your toes the whole way through. Parts of the zone are only traversable once you use cannons that launch you around, and the titular ocean of oil is only lethal if you happen to stand in it and do nothing for 4 seconds. During early development, this zone was meant to be a dystopian future for the Beta Green Hill Zone, but now it stands as its own area, no doubt to act as a fueling station for the Death Egg. The music here is very foreboding and industrial sounding, with an almost desert sounding flute tune. The boss of this zone is the Egg Marine. The next stage is Metropolis Zone, another big city, this one mostly green and brown in colour and powered by steam and giant gears. The Doctor's City holds perhaps the most dangerous set pieces in the entire game. Not only conveyor belts, platforms with spears jutting out of them, pools of molten metal and the intimidating crushers, but also a variety of badniks that would haunt your nightmares. Act 1 also has a moment where you realise that the level repeats vertically. The music, in a slight contrast to the zone's high difficulty, is very upbeat and catchy, while still fitting in with the industrial theme, and even adding a record scratch soundbite. The boss for this zone is the Egg Bouncer.
You're my friend now. We're having soft tacos later.
The chase leads Sonic and Tails to Sky Chase Zone, a single-act stage set in the skies. Things are momentarily relaxed here, and the music does a lot to reflect this. As the game's only auto-scroll section, you maneuver around the screen with the tornado being piloted by either Sonic or Tails, and it's always there to catch you so you don't fall off the level. The only obstacles are a few badniks, and there's no boss battle, however the setting for the next one is foreshadowed in the midpoint of the stage. Wing Fortress Zone is Dr. Robotnik's aerial battleship, and the penultimate stage of the game. Very akin to Sky Base Zone from Sonic 8-bit, you navigate across the exterior of the airship, hitching rides on dodgy catapults, avoiding automated turrets, and trying not to fall to your death in the pit below. It is in this zone where Robotnik was given his proper Japanese name for the first time in an overseas release, along with an old version of his logo. I don't know, I kinda like the EG decal. The beta name for this zone was originally Sky Fortress Zone, and the music used is very grandiose, like a fanfare for the Royal Air Force or something. This zone also only consists of one act, and has a boss fight against the laser prison at the end. The final level is Death Egg Zone, the Doctor's space station and base of operations. Set in outer space, this short stage consists of 2 boss rooms, has an altered version of Chemical Plant Zone's tile set, and plays the most unappreciated level theme ever heard, being drowned out by the boss themes after walking a few steps forward. The view of the planet and the glistening stars speeding by are truly mesmerising. The bosses of this zone are Mecha Sonic and the Death Egg Robot. Another notable music track I think is important to note is that of the options menu, which includes the theme of the ending cutscene in them, which I suppose would make this the main theme of Sonic 2. It also plays during the menu screen in the 2-player mode. The invincibility theme when you get the magic dust is a fast-paced remix of the title theme, and the invulnerability sparkles are not as numerous as before, but they orbit around Sonic in such a fine manner that I find this effect more visually appealing, especially when running. The special stage music, god, I wish I was a kid in the 90s experiencing this for the first time, because imagine getting to a pole, seeing the random stars floating on the top and deciding to jump into them, and then being blown away by this new gameplay style with the energetic 16-bit horns blaring. This music track really gets you pumped. I like it more than the somber sounding one in the first game. And the Supersonic theme, after you have acquired the 7 Chaos Emeralds, is really triumphant sounding. The music itself makes you feel like you're jacked up with Chaos Emerald energy right into your veins. It's a shame that the track is so short and loops so quickly though. The music whenever you face Dr. Robotnik in Act 2 loses the ominous sensation the first game utilised, where the music would immediately override the cheery level theme, as if telling you, hey, you better watch out. Instead it has the stage music slowly fade out, and Robotnik's theme start playing as he trots out his new mech to fight you with. It is very catchy, and yet still signifies just how much of a recurring threat the big bad is. It sounds a bit like it's from Sonic's perspective, like it's more bouncy and fun because, he's used to tussling with this guy by now. The big bad's got a new mech, time for fun. The final boss music, on the other hand, uses wickedly epic 8-bit horns and a marching drum beat that rings in your ears as you watch the giant mech step forward and back. One of the best final bosses in Sonic for its presentation and music alone, if I'm being honest. I've already talked about the ending cutscene music and how hecking happy it is, so I'll dedicate this last bit to the credits theme. Once again, Nakamura composes a victorious tune as the credits roll, with each of the zone's themes being incorporated one after the other to match the tempo. There's no little gameplay demos to see, sadly, and it's instead played against a black background. Doesn't stop the music from being catchy though. Sonic the Hedgehog, as he is still the little guy with attitude. Not only does he get to showcase more of his rebellious snark, such as when he sits on the ground when you wait too long in his extended idle animation, but he even looks better visually than in the last game. His eye shape is more rounded, and the blue fur on his sprites have been touched up ever so slightly to show more colours, all of them having a different kind of lighting that makes his fur extra glossy. In his supersonic form, his constant scowl persists in all of his animations. He's so powerful at this point that no mere ledge will terrify him. Tails makes for a great sidekick character. His cute charm and his persistent drive to follow Sonic around and be just as rebellious and cool is evident as early as the title sequence, where he squeezes himself out of the ring shortly after he does. I've already talked about how important he is to the story as Sonic's little buddy, but I must commend the effort in his sprite work too. His tails casually swish about during idle animations, and if no buttons are pressed, he'll eventually yawn at the player innocently. The detail of his tail sticking out when rolling into a ball is also a very creative touch, them going in the opposite direction of where he leaps. He's honestly adorable in all of his sprites. It's sadly a shame he cannot go into a super state after getting all of the Chaos Emeralds though. Dr. Robotnik returns as the sole boss fought at the end of almost every zone's Act 2, with not many notable changes except for his colour palettes, which aren't very noticeable except for the yellow triangles on his suit. The Eggmobile has underwent a significant design change, having an extended front and spherical back behind the seat. All of the Doctor's boss mechs are somewhat more complex than before. Instead of just being the flying pod with a weapon crudely attached to it, most of its appearances in Sonic 2 are more armoured, with metallic features to hide the rim of the cockpit. The added effect, where one or more pieces of the mech break off when Robotnik is defeated, is a nice touch too, along with the meaty looking explosion effect. I want that on a pizza. Fun fact, like in the previous game, none of these boss mechs had proper names until the Sonic the Hedgehog Encyclopedia came out, so people just went by the names translated from the Japanese manual. Drill Eggman, Flying Eggman, it was a different time. The last two bosses are interesting in their own right. As the final line of defense within the Def Egg, Mecha Sonic is a popular character despite only appearing in this part of the game. Its bulky design was meant to replicate Mechagodzilla and Gigan to give it a sense of strength, and it possesses a single glowing eye. It's one of the first Badniks to not have an animal as a power source, and it's pretty much capable of doing anything Sonic can do, but better. But really it's only hard because you have no rings to save you from being one-shotted. There's actually a complicated relationship with the name of this mech. It was called Mecha Sonic in Japan, but since it went unnamed in the manual, and the name would also be attributed to the radically different version in Sonic and Knuckles, fans would call it Silver Sonic to easily differentiate it from its successor. It stuck out so much amongst its peers, even being called Robo Sonic in its appearance in LEGO Dimensions. A name like Silver Sonic would follow even in its appearances in the Archie Comics spin-off, which lasted about 2 decades, and for years that name would tentatively stick, until later on it would be officially called Mecha Sonic in any official material to match with the original Japanese name, with the later one being called Mecha Sonic Mark II. So, to clarify, the other ones, barring Metal Sonic himself, are just upgrades on this one. Case closed. The Def Egg robot, at the time of release, was such an imposing game changer. While you had no rings and thus couldn't be as reckless with your attacks, the way Robotnik fled and hopped into it, and making it rise up out of the ground to the music is undeniably awesome, to say nothing of its imposing stance which reached almost the entire height of the screen. I only wish the mech wasn't overused in later games to keep calling back to this famous boss battle, or at the very least give it a better name than just the Def Egg robot, because for the most part it's not fought there anymore. What was the name they gave it in the Archie books? The Egg Destroyer Battlesuit? Yeah, use that name, that sounds appropriately terrifying. Other characters, which of course I wouldn't forget, are the animals, once again popping out of defeated Badniks and being freed from capsules at the end, which have a bigger switch on the top and no window to show the little guys trapped inside. Along with the animal friends from Sonic 1, new additions to the captured animal gang include Lockie, Becky, Wocky, Mickey, and Toki. The Tokis only appear in Sky Chase Zone, so whenever you pop a Badnik open, yep, better hope Tails is catching them too. The Badniks in this game are hecking numerous, with a bunch of newly introduced enemy types which change depending on the zone instead of their appearances overlapping in multiple ones. Their general design is somewhat more menacing than the goofy looking cartoon robots in the first game, with most having angrier expressions and grey textures to emphasise their inorganic design. This is especially notable in the game's official art. They just look more mechanical and threatening in nature. Coconuts are probably the first ones players will meet, monkey robots that position themselves up on trees and toss coconuts down at you. They appear in Emerald Hill Zone. Buzzers are a slow variant of the Buzz Bombers, which float back and forth and shoot out a tiny fireball if you're below them. They appear in Emerald Hill Zone. Masher is this level's answer to the choppers from Sonic 1, and serve very much the same purpose. They appear in Emerald Hill Zone. Spinies sluggishly move back and forth and can launch a projectile out of the top of their heads. They appear in Chemical Plant Zone. Grabbers are spider badniks, which reach down at you from the ceiling and trap you in a deadly hug, followed by a self-destruct. They can be freed if Tails is on hand to destroy it while it's distracted. They also appear in Chemical Plant Zone. Grounders are a bulky upgrade of the Borobot model. While they are too heavy to leap into the air, they make up for it with the ability to ambush you through walls. They are seen in Aquatic Ruin Zone. Wisps come in swarms of 3 or 5 and ambush you if you happen to run into them. They appear in Aquatic Ruin Zone. Chop Chops are aquatic badniks that chomp at you if you get too close underwater. They appear in water in the Aquatic Underwater Ruinous Remains area of the video game. Crawls are the only badnik found in Casino Night Zone. With their bumper shield, they block attacks from the front and above, but are weak to a spin attack or spin dash from behind. Spikers are hermit crab badniks with a long spiny shell that they will launch vertically if you get in range. They appear in Hilltop Zone. Rexons are fire-breathing plesiosaur badniks that stand in lava, but are only a threat if you're 2 inches in front of them. Their body becomes a permanent platform when destroyed, and they also appear in Hilltop Zone. Golas, also known as souls, are a variant of the Orbinauts that have flames around them as a shield, though they quickly send them forward as a means of attack. They appear in the only other level with fire in it. Flashers are flying beetle badniks that float around set areas, periodically lighting themselves up in a light which harms you if you touch it. They appear in Mystic Cave Zone. Crawltons are centipede badniks which hide in inaccessible areas, popping their segmented bodies out to attack with their faces, which also happens to be their weak point. They appear in Mystic Cave Zone. Octus is the name of an octopus badnik which hops on the spot, hovering in the air when you're near and spitting out a projectile. They appear in Oil Ocean Zone. Seahorse badniks that float around and follow you for an uncomfortably long time until defeated. They have a nasty habit of sniping you with oil bullets when you least expect it, so make sure to bugger off. Asterons act more like mines and don't have animals powering them. They flash for a second and inch towards you and explode, shooting off 5-pointed projectiles in a star-like formation. They appear in Metropolis Zone. Shellcrackers are an upgrade of the crab meats and are almost always encountered in corridors. Their extendable claw is notoriously hard to avoid, and they appear in Metropolis Zone. Slicers are the bane of many a playthrough thanks to the homing sickles they send after you. If you happen to avoid them, they are just left helpless and stand there motionless. They are thankfully confined to only Metropolis Zone. Valkyries are bird badniks shaped like jets that fly horizontally through the air at varying speeds, and they only appear in Sky Chase Zone. Nebulas are weird. They are clearly turtle badniks that sit in little egg-shaped flying machines, but their artwork and future game appearances make them look like a generic flying drone with eyes. They shoot spiky balls down at you if you are below them, and they only appear in Sky Chase Zone. Turtleoids are badniks riding atop a bigger one, which they use to fire a single projectile. They also appear in Sky Chase Zone. Finally, Cluckers are the sole badnik of Wing Fortress Zone, popping up out of specific points and firing egg-shaped projectiles from their cannons. Turning around is a foreign concept to them, apparently. And the award for the most ported Sonic game goes to, well, the first one really. Sonic 2 was their most popular game at the time, so it got its fair share of ports too. Starting from the top, locking Sonic 2 into the Sonic & Knuckles cartridge gave us Knuckles the Echidna in Sonic 2, a version of the game with Knuckles as the only playable character. He has all of his abilities from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but his jumps don't reach the same height as Sonic or Tails, meaning he has a tougher time against boss battles. The colour palettes for the blue Flicky Birds are red, and the blue shields grey, due to Knuckles replacing the Blue Boy in the coding. Sonic 2 has been ported in multiple packs across multiple consoles, including third-party ones, most notably Sonic Jam and Sonic Mega Collection. It wasn't until the mobile port in 2013 where we got a version with new features. Once again thanking Christian Whitehead and Simon Thomley for breathing new life into these classic games with their remasters. There are so many alterations and secrets scattered around this version. You can save your progress in up to 4 slots and select any zone you wish after completing the game on that file, like how Sonic 3 did. There is a time attack mode, a boss attack zone, which is one long zone that contains nearly every boss in the game, though I would have enjoyed Egg Gauntlet Zone more, its original version before they were ordered to not use a funky colour palette, and an updated multiplayer mode. The 2-player mode in this game has Knuckles as an additional character, and adds new race courses to the roster, namely Chemical Plant, Aquatic Ruin, Hilltop, and Oil Ocean zones. Tails can now fly like he does in later games, as well as airlift his partner when prompted. But wait, there's more! Knuckles the Echidna is a playable character from the start, the Super State transformations being activated by hitting the jump button twice instead of just once, allowing you to use it more strategically, or for the funsies of course. Special stages are now fully 3-dimensional environments, closely resembling the low poly era of Sonic, which I approve. They also updated sprites to give them proper rotation, and added some sound effects that weren't there in the original, mostly enemy shoot noises. And the end of the credits now include a cutscene to show the Death Egg falling out of the sky and landing in the location of the next game, with Knuckles hiding in a bush nearby, which is a very clever homage to that game's North American box art. The game's level select has more secrets this time around. You can use elemental shields from Sonic 3, make all the monitors set to random like you could in multiplayer mode, do a secret 8th special stage added to the game, play as Knuckles but with Tails following you around if you're into that, and if you use debug mode then you can finally let Tails live the dream of being Super Tails in Sonic 2. Everyone's happy. It's in this version onward that they got rid of the level transition, where the colours gradually go darker until it goes to full black. I loved that effect in the original, and I hate that they didn't bring it back ever again. There are other toggleable changes as well to fine-tweak your experience. And of course, I couldn't forget the most important addition to this version of the game. In previous versions of Sonic 2, there's a specific spike pit in Mystic Cave Zone that you cannot get out of without dying, very slowly if you happen to be Supersonic. But this remaster instead replaces that pit with not spikes, but the entrance to a whole new zone. Yep, Hidden Palace Zone is back, baby! Both the updated one and a version that more closely resembles the unfinished original, named Proto Palace Zone, that is hidden in the game's code. Hidden Palace has a whole new look and level gimmicks. Previously unused badniks from the beta, which, they are reds. Little dinosaur badniks that can breathe fire. Batbots, which probably inspired the ones in Sonic 3, attack by diving in a U-shaped arc. Stegways, which just ram at you if you were in front of them. And the newly introduced Gelignites, which act as an underwater version of the Grabber Badniks. Additionally, at the end of the zone, there's an original boss battle against Robotnik by an abandoned archaic pipe organ. This mech is officially known as Brass Eggman to go along with the older naming convention of bosses, but that won't do, so I'm officially calling it the Egg Trombone from now on. Back on track with the ports, Sonic 2 later got a port for the 3DS, 3D Sonic the Hedgehog 2, which had a lot of its own customizable features and modes. SEGA Ages Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Nintendo Switch would keep some of these modes, as well as the option to use the drop dash move from Sonic Mania. The port in Sonic Origins would include the iOS version and all of its features plus the drop dash, including its own boss rush mode, mirror mode, mission mode, and features 2D animated cutscenes that are honestly splendid to watch. Make a cartoon show out of them, Sega. Sonic Origins Plus would include all of the previous game's features, while also having a playable Amy Rose in Sonic 2, while also finally allowing a female character to achieve a super form. I may as well go into comics because I like them so much. Much like the first game, the events of Sonic 2 have been adapted in manga and comic form, from the manga by Shoga Kugin with its silly cast, to the UK's Sonic the Comic having the game's events already happen, but having Sonic and Tails redo the battle with Mega Sonic in a return visit. Archie Comics referenced the game twice. Issue number 289 illustrated parts of the end, with the Wing Fortress and Death Egg zones being the main focus, as part of the Genesis of a Hero storyline. They are very game accurate, not counting Robotnik's sidekick Snively from the comics. I miss that guy. Issues number 228 and 229, the comic's Genesis arc before it got rebooted, had the cast go through some zones from Sonic 2 after Eggman had rewritten the universe to look that way as part of his master plan to defeat Sonic. Because if he can't defeat him, he'll change the world around him. Comics can be weird like that. The artwork and colours really did the source material justice though, just look at the Death Egg robot. In terms of fan content, obviously they'd gravitate towards the beta zones. If there's one thing us fans are beyond fascinated with, it's unused Sonic stuff, and the series is hecking full of it, so can you really blame us? There has been multiple restorations and ROM hacks which restore Hidden Palace, Wood and Sand Shower Zone, and they are all very well and good. Having a rematch with the Egg Drillster while avoiding spiky bones is not something I expected to see. One impressive recreation is that of Cyber/Genocide City Zone by ROM hacker Hez. In December 2023, the digitized papers of zone artist Tom Payne ended up leaked on the internet by the Video Game History Foundation, revealing to the world all the different concepts and traps that would have been showcased in Cyber City Zone. Hez put together a playable version of the zone through guesswork and extra assets from the Sonic Spinball stage that were inspired by the unused game's tile set. This partial recreation is incredible to behold, and I can see why it would have been called Genocide City Zone now. I'd be here all day if I was to talk about the different ROM hacks of Sonic 2, so let's talk about a game that was inspired by it directly. Sonic before the sequel and Sonic after the sequel were fan games made by a one Lake Feppard, best known nowadays for his innovative Spark the Electric Jester games. Using its own engine to replicate the classics, these two games have Sonic and Tails first meeting and dealing with the soon-to-be-launched Death Egg, and a tussle with the Doctor on a wholly different island, respectively. Both hold up rather well, and I would highly suggest playing them in your own time. The music too, freaking awesome, even if it's a bit unconventional for classic Sonic. The most ambitious fan game, by far, is Sonic 2 HD. While currently incomplete, they've just reached Aquatic Ruin Zone by the time of recording for this video, they did a terrific job recreating every asset, background, and every inch of the zones to make it all the more appealing and vibrant. The hand-animated high-definition graphics really grabbed me. Just look at the swaying palm trees. They even replicated the fading to black effect. It's not perfect, but it's something. Look at that. And of course, the music by T-Loops is hecking amazing. Whenever I reach Act 2 of Chemical Plant Zone, my freaking neuron activation goes off. That's like the third time I've done that joke. And that's Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for you. Well worth the wide critical acclaim, I feel. At the time, the grand scope of the game, as well as its increased number of characters and gameplay elements, were praised, though a fair number of them said the campaign was too easy to complete. I mean, I get you, the enemies in the first part of the game weren't nearly as tough as the ones throughout the first game. The two-player mode was also considered detrimental to the game's quality because, as innovative as it was still rather sluggish to play on 90s hardware. Regardless of those issues, the game was undoubtedly a big high point for the Hedgehog's popularity. The steps forward this game took, as well as its solid presentation and aesthetic, ripples throughout the entire series. Call me a basic bitch, but I feel that Sonic 2 deserves a top spot on the tier list. Yep, I may be biased about Sonic, but I don't care because I'm right. As little as I remember of it, the 90s really was an interesting time. It was an era of developing media and a mix of senses for baby me. If I wasn't nonchalantly vibing to Queen's greatest hits over the radio, or being horrified by snippets of movies I really shouldn't have been watching at midnight, I was watching Sonic the Hedgehog cartoons on television. The Blue Boy was like my crack growing up. Whether I was at home, at school, anywhere I went, Sonic would be buzzing around in my mind, and you could see him and his adventures just about anywhere. What a time to be alive, dude. I would first experience the Blue Boy on the PC, to be specific, the Sonic & Knuckles collection, and when getting a SEGA Mega Drive for Christmas, I got the whole classic trilogy. Sonic 2, then Sonic 1 that came with a multi-pack bundle, and the subject of this video, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles when combined with the additional cartridge. I love this game. I have distinct memories of playing it on many platforms, scribbling down intricate notes on enemies and bosses. One time when my old cousin slept around, we played the first half in the living room well into the night, and continued where we left off the next morning before anyone else woke up. Come rise or shine, we were utter fanatics. Sonic 3, or as it's fully known, Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, is quite the interesting case of a game. Its myriad of complications starting from the very start of development to the present day and its convoluted music rights that even today video game historians can't accurately define. There's a lot to talk about with this thing, so buckle your f***les as we go into Sonic 3's history, my experiences with the game, and every other odd detail I've memorized over the years. I hope you're comfortably seated. Would you believe me if I said Sonic 3 was originally conceptualized with pseudo-3-dimensional gameplay? That's what the SEGA Technical Institute briefly considered, using the SEGA Virtua processor chip to give it a polygonal look like they would later use in Virtua Racer, which was pretty much an answer to Nintendo's Super Effects chip. It's because of its low polygon count when they decided to restart production with a traditional 2D platformer instead, turning what would be Sonic 3D into Sonic 3. Though the game's special stages, and I imagine the heavily pixelated Sonic model on the title screen, were a remnant of that idea. And I love this title screen, by the way. Everything from the background and the traditionally checkered banner is just so pleasing to the eye. The 3D looking models did look better in the Sonic & Knuckles title though. Making an isometric 3D game on this console was possible, as Flicky's Island would later prove. It was just not the innovation this team were focused on. Anyway, so to recap the timeline, the SEGA Technical Institute split into two halves, and one was told to make Sonic Spinball, an inherently difficult yet funky pinball side game. The other half would work on the next installment for the mainline games, which would be released towards the end of the Mega Drive's lifespan. As the game was developed on in the United States, steering this ship was Hirokazu Yasuhara, game designer, plus directing for the Sonic 3 portion, and Yuji Naka, producer and lead programmer who really did not want to work with the American team anymore. The dude was reportedly a real pain in the ass to work with unless they spoke his native language, though Sega still hired the guy for his impressive technical prowess. It was him who requested the inclusion of the lock-on cartridge idea after all, so as much of a harsh bugger as he proved he wasn't all talk. The team found influences from many sources, such as Ice Cap Zone and its sudden snowboard segment based off the activities the team did during their downtime, and Angel Island being inspired by an island in San Francisco Bay of the same name. Considering the island was located right across the SEGA Technical Institute building, suddenly the in-game visual of a far-off island across the sea sounds more profoundly understandable, certainly invoking its mythicalness. For Sonic 3 anyway, they hired the musical talents of pop musician Michael Jackson himself to write for some of the tracks, although what involvement he had and what music he provided I will go into in a later segment. As is probably common knowledge at this point, Sonic 3 and the add-on Sonic & Knuckles were originally supposed to be one single game with like 100 ideas crammed into it, but was forced to make into two separate games instead, apparently super reluctantly. The team worked super hard with the 34 megabit cartridge with MV RAM despite how sodding expensive they were to manufacture. And since Sega America wanted their tie-in promotion with McDonald's the coming year, it was either break it or leave it, and they ultimately chose the latter. All things considered, the team did the best they could despite the circumstances, even if there was the occasional bug where Knuckles got Sonic's colour palette, or any of the other game-breaking glitches. Although the guys who did the English manuals probably took note of that and added this hand wave in one of their pages. Yeah, they're not glitches, they're Robotnik's diabolical traps, which would become an inside joke for the community. This space in their schedule gave the team more time to develop Sonic 3's second half, implementing level designs that would be fitting for the new playstyles, and introducing Sonic's first rival. Nope, not Metal Sonic, I'm talking about the spike-fisted grape enjoyer, Knuckles the Echidna. Yep, Sonic 3 featured the debut of the prominent recurring punchy guy himself, with Takeshi Thomas Yuda providing the species of animal, and Pamela Kelly giving him the name, although his name was originally Dreads to go along with his dreadlocks. I have a soft spot for his beta short king design though, it's much more mole-like and I really dig the goggles. It was Yuda who designed the character, although he wore a lot of different hats during production, and he had been a part of Sonic's history since Sonic 2 8-bit, if this credit is anything to go by. There was supposedly a lot of ideas for his fur colour too, with potential proposals for a green colour, or as Naka suggested, a nice purple, but the colour red got the most positive feedback. And I like that they picked that, along with the Rastafarian colour scheme for his shoes. And the peculiar white crescent shape on his chest was, at least to me, thought to be like a Nike symbol, but it's supposed to symbolise the moon and contrast with Sonic's round belly. His red colour goes well with Sonic's blue, and goes really well with the main villain when paired together. Knuckles is a fun inclusion to the cast, and looks very funky on the box art too, and I suppose that's as good of a segue as any. The one I grew up with was the European cover, which was drawn by Duncan Gutteridge, an independent artist who had also been commissioned for promotional artwork and such for Sonic 2. With Sonic and his spunky attitude, his mohawk-looking quills combed to one side, and holding up 3 fingers. Bold of them to have the background be the more untraditional 4th zone instead of one more befitting of an iconic level, like Angel Island Zone. Yeah, that was the approach the North American cover went with anyway. Martin showcases the returning characters in the middle of a thick jungle that's being set on fire, with a sinister, shadowy figure glaring from the bushes. The background was originally going to be set in a more South Island adjacent location, and Sonic's fingers make me hungry for some sausages right now. The Japanese cover is consistently abstract, with jagged lines and patterns against a white backdrop, with the character art in the foreground. Not much to say about it, really, but let's not forget the box art for Sonic and Knuckles. The covers are slightly different depending on the region, but front and centre is a very appealing looking logo incorporating the pair's silhouettes. It's pretty badass. In fact, on the North American box art, there's a hidden note on the bottom, and it says, "Like, comment and subscribe if you like these Sonic retrospectives." Curious, but I implore you to consider. Sonic 3 would be released in 1994, first in North America on the 2nd of February, a little later for Europe and Australia, and in Japan on the 27th of May. The add-on, Sonic & Knuckles, would come out later that year on the 18th of October for most regions, with a November 19th release in Australia. I didn't know of Groundhog Day until writing this script, but the 2nd of February release was to coincide with that local holiday, renaming the festivity Hedgehog Day for it, so that's neat. While the games were technically released as separate products that could be conventionally merged together, for the rest of this video I shall be treating them as one whole game as originally intended, unless I'm mentioning differences and bits and pieces exclusive to those versions. And speaking of versions, I know Sonic Origins came with an updated, widescreen supporting re-release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and it does look heckin' good, but I'll be mainly covering the original Mega Drive version, as that was the one I grew up with. All good? Great. So the team really put their all in making a deeper, more serious story, and as the series' first instance of continuity not confined to the manual booklets, I feel it reasonable to focus on the game's story and levels first. Last we saw of Dr. Robotnik, his orbital battleship was knocked out of the sky and left careening towards the planet. It happens to land on Angel Island, a mysterious floating island, and the sheer mass of the thing doesn't necessarily cause any lasting harm to the environment, but it does disrupt the balance of the Master Emerald, the thing that allows Angel Island to float. So now it's a regular island. The Japanese manual goes into detail about how Robotnik started terraforming the island to rebuild the Death Egg, but this must have happened later in recent interpretations, so I'll humour them for a second. I love the animations, okay? Robotnik sees that he has landed on a very special island filled with all sorts of delights, including the Master Emerald, but also incurs the wrath of the Guardian of the Green Rock, Knuckles the Echidna, the last of his kind, and a loner who is tough as nails, but is also occasionally an easily tricked goofball. That last aspect comes into play when Robotnik tricks him into going after Sonic and Tails, because he is a kindly scientist, and those two stole all the Chaos Emeralds and are probably going after him too. So they form a truce, a joint effort to eliminate the Hedgehog once and for all that will certainly not bite the Echidna in the arse later. A couple days later, Tails would detect Chaos Emerald energy from his jewel detector following the fall of the Death Egg, and gains knowledge of an ancient civilization that had harnessed the energy of the 7 Chaos Emeralds in their hands, which had also led to their downfall when the Elders tried to harness the power for themselves. We actually see that in a later game, so I'm actually really grateful I got to read this in the Japanese manual. Much thanks again to Sonic Retro for their translations. And so the duo speed right up to Angel Island, Tails flying in the tornado, and Sonic decided to go on ahead in his super form. However, walloping him right out of it is Knuckles, who takes all of their Chaos Emeralds and stores them away. What a bugger. You seeing this crap, Tails? For the remainder of most of the game is the usual obstacle courses, Bannock trouncing, and Dr. Robotnik scuffles, this time across the varied biomes of Angel Island. It starts in Angel Island Zone, a tropical jungle that quickly loses its lushly detailed pixel foliage to a colour palette of searing flames shortly before starting, something Knuckles seems to have no issue with. Following that is Hydro City Zone, the subterranean system of waterways which conceal ruins and turbine tunnels, Marble Garden Zone, mysterious temples dotted around hillish plains with purplish mountains in the background, also spikes, lots and lots of spikes. A warning sign would be very helpful here, but I digress. Next is Carnival Night Zone, a metropolis hosting a never-ending carnival, probably built by Robotnik himself judging by its hazards, his affinity for theme parks, and certain deadly traps like the fan nicknamed Barrel of Doom. That sodding barrel has caused me many a time over in my first few years of playing. I'd straight up give in and continue the game as Knuckles, I was so frustrated. How was I supposed to know pressing up and down on the barrel would slowly make your way forward? Oh. The icy mountains house Ice Cap Zone, where pristine labyrinthine caverns and snowy slopes exist, and the story comes to a head when Sonic and Tails reach Launch Base Zone, a trap-filled site constructed entirely to repair the fallen Death Egg. Throughout, Knuckles is also encountered a few times, one of which he gets embarrassingly knocked off balance. But yeah, the Death Egg begins its launch sequence yet again, and while Dr. Robotnik confronts them during its ascent, that mech's defeat causes them to launch into the next area, with the big bad's battleship once again crashing into Angel Island. This thing goes back and forth more often than a sodding paddleball. Also, depending on what version of the game you're playing, the story either continues to the next zone, or the game ends following a climactic boss fight against the Big Arms mech. A shame that gets eliminated from the main campaign in the full version. Did that thing hurt Super Sonic? At the proverbial half point of the game, Mushroom Hills Zone is where the characters are deposited, a forest abundant with mushroom platforms which ends up radically changing seasons as you continue through it. Remember the airship set piece in Angel Island Zone? Well, that's actually the setting for the next zone, Flying Battery. This airship is rather similar to Wing Fortress Zone, but purple. Traps are literally around every corner, there's a lot of magnets to maneuver around, and it's canonically where the prison eggs are stowed away. It was also supposed to take place in between Carnival Night and Ice Cap Zones, but I suppose, like Labyrinth Zone from Sonic 1, it was pushed forward for its difficulty. That's where Sonic's makeshift snowboard would have come from. Sandopolis Zone is a vast desert with a couple of enigmatic pyramids, and may have been a contribution to my crazy fascination with Egyptian history when I was a kid. Act 2 is notable for being inside one such pyramid, where there's cute little ghosties that float around on the top. Oh god. Lava Reef Zone is probably one of my faves for aesthetic and music reasons. It's the underground interior of Angel Island itself, and full of magma, and most of the floor is made up of large rocks, wooden structures, and curiously volatile machinery. It's this area where the Death Egg had landed, and is where everyone converges in the plot. Nearby is Hidden Palace Zone, the shortest zone in the game, and evidently reusing the title of the previously unused Sonic 2 level. It is where the Master Emerald is located, along with a couple of other intriguing gems, which I'll get into in due time. A high foreshadowing mural. Here is where Sonic and Knuckles have their face-off, Dr. Robotnik enacts his plan to give the Death Egg a new power source, and Knuckles sees who the real bad guy is. So with the Master Emerald stolen, Knuckles finally sees that he has been tricked and helps the heroes out of the pit they were dumped into. He's not around for long though, we did kind of knock the wind out of him and he got electrocuted not too long ago. He reveals the way to the penultimate stage of the main campaign, the ever-popular Sky Sanctuary Zone, sacred ruins which float above Angel Island. The Death Egg has began rising for the third time, and to impede the hero's progress, the good doctor sends out egg robos to cover its launch. You coming, Knuckles? Okay, well, see you in the good ending. The heroes thankfully make it in the nick of time, leaping up onto the Death Egg, which houses the final platform level of the game. Look at all this stuff here. There's laser bridges, electric traps, and gimmicks on every square inch of this zone. And Act 2 introduces anti-gravity sections to the series, where you maneuver the playable character from the ceiling, though your controls are otherwise the same. After felling Dr. Robotnik's newest and biggest mechanical threats, the Master Emerald still ends up in the villain's clutches, and depending on your choices, ends this segment with several outcomes. If you hadn't collected all the Chaos Emeralds, the ending cutscenes appear, showing Angel Island still stuck in the ocean, but still freed from Dr. Robotnik's control. However, he has the Master Emerald in his possession. If playing as Tails and you get all the Chaos Emeralds, then you get his good ending, where the Master Emerald is returned after Sonic catches the fox in the tornado. The green rock is returned to Angel Island, which is able to float again. If you get either set of 7 emeralds, then Sonic follows Dr. Robotnik into the real final zone, Doomsday Zone, only accessible with Supersonic or Hypersonic. Sonic chases Dr. Robotnik for the Master Emerald one last time above Mobius, in various mechs. This officially sets the trend in Sonic games where the final level is only unlocked when all the Chaos Emeralds are collected. Completing this gets the magic rock back, Knuckles is pleased as punch, and Angel Island is restored to the sky as Sonic and Tails celebrate. Another one of Dr. Robotnik's schemes is foiled, and finally, the Death Egg saga comes to a close. Well, there is also Knuckles' playable campaign, available in Sonic & Knuckles and in the joint game, though it's not too different from the main one. Set sometime after Angel Island was restored to normal, as evidenced by the backgrounds of some zones, one of the Egg Robos suddenly reappears to cause a ruckus, ruining the peace, and is joined by all of the Badniks, who are now back in their usual spots. Knuckles follows this Egg Robo across most of the zones, in the exact same order as Sonic and Tails, but taking some different routes, and clashes with this Badnik who rides in all of the mechs its creator had used. All boss battles reintroduced are relatively the same, but with some added attacks, more aggressive battle tactics that overall make them harder to defeat, or in Marble Garden's case, modify the arena and battle entirely. All except for Flying Battery Zone. Did he grow some flesh? Once Knuckles reaches Sky Sanctuary, however, it's revealed that this Egg Robo was working under the orders of Mega Sonic Mark II, the latest in a line of Sonic copycats which the duo had initially faced off against but didn't properly finish off, so now he's back for vengeance. The Egg Robo is accidentally destroyed before Knuckles and Mega Sonic have a scuffle, but even after being nearly destroyed again, the robot is cunning enough to attempt other measures. The Master Emerald is right there, somehow, and using it he becomes Super Mecha Sonic, which is honestly rather badass. However, even that isn't enough to take down Rad Red, and with his proper defeat, the Master Emerald is returned back to Angel Island with the help of Sonic in the tornado. The endings are once again based on whether you have the emeralds or not. Would you rather see Knuckles be a wimpy little baby and witness Angel Island fall back into the ocean, and Mega Sonic inexplicably return with the green rock in his clutches? Or see the Chad Knuckles holding the Master Emerald in his pink powered up form and Angel Island soaring ever higher, even nearly reaching space? The choice is yours. Thank God Mobians don't need to breathe, am I right? Gosh, that musical swell was triumphant as heck. In fact, that leads me to another important subject regarding Sonic 3. Do Michael Jackson is soundtrack? So, a brief history lesson before we get into the game's soundtrack as we address the elephant in the room. Michael Joseph Jackson, he's this American singer and songwriter, and also a freaking cool dancer, who was extremely popular in the 20th century. Like, he was so popular he appeared practically everywhere. Even in The Simpsons, that's how much of an icon he was. Basically, throughout his life, he was a huge song guy, and a very significant cultural figure. Anyway, back to Sonic. During the development of the first half of Sonic 3, the team decided not to commission the previous game's composer, Masato Nakamura, to make the new soundtrack because his rising star status and how expensive his royalties were. As such, they had to look inward and brought on a bunch of composers. And I mean a lot. The dude had massive shoes to fill. Some standouts were Bradley Boxer, keyboardist and regular collaborator with Michael Jackson, the pop star of which who had worked with SEGA to create a game adaptation of Moonwalker, which is its own kind of thing I shan't get into. The arcade one's got penis robots! Mr. Jackson was big on Sonic, and while it's unknown whether he or the Institute approached each other first, he did provide audio snippets of his traditional beatboxing. You can just make it out in the tracks his team composed. Then the thing happened. In 1993, there were accusations around him being inappropriate to children. His public image was at stake, and whoopsie, time to leave the project. Whether the guys at SEGA wanted to remove his involvement in the soundtrack, or that he was unsatisfied with the Mega Drive's sound capabilities, there's reports on both of those statements. SEGA would hide his contributions and remove his name from the credits. This was towards the end of development too, it's worth mentioning, so during this vigorous period of development, they had to keep his beatboxing in, though many songs he or any of his associates created would eventually be quietly replaced following Sonic & Knuckles' development, and completely replaced in the combined versions, as was the case in the year 2000 when the Sonic & Knuckles collection was released. Using the best MIDI tracks available at the time, the soundtrack was relatively unchanged except for certain level themes from the Sonic 3 portion, and they sound interesting. For the longest time, it was thought that these were written on the fly to finally let the game be re-released legally, but it would be discovered way later in 2019 that this music did exist before. The 1993 prototype used these tracks, so the only explanation was that for this port, they lifted these substitute tracks from the beta, touched them up a bit, and dropped them right in, to the confusion of many fans at the time. This would also be true for the Sonic Origins re-release, which I'll also get into later. It was so crazy being a fan of Sonic 3 music back in the day. Fans could only speculate as their ears picked up similar beats from the King of Pop's albums, which only added fuel to the fires of curiosity. Staff and Sonic team members speaking out about it did nothing to lessen the heated fandom discussions. Naoto Oshima stated Jackson's tracks were not approved because of the controversy involving him. Roger Hector insisted they made an entire soundtrack that took hours upon hours to record, but details involving them were confidential. And Naka would deny MJ's involvement outright. So yeah, if you're wondering why it took so long for Sonic 3 to be brought back officially, these are the reasons why. Through the long, tangled web of contradictions and obscured info. In conclusion, what I can make of it is that these two certainly worked on music tracks for Sonic 3. Most of Jackson's own ones were supposedly scrapped, with Boxer having picked up the pace from MJ's music sheets, which in the finished product sound very, very similar to actual album songs made by each of them. I can't play any of the music at the risk of copyright, but here are the names of zone tracks thought to sound like they were officially recorded songs. I'm sure there's comparisons online somewhere. The rest of the soundtrack had to be lightly rearranged by Sonic Spinball's Howard Drossin, who would be the sole lead composer come Sonic & Knuckles. But he wouldn't be alone. Sound director Jun Sonoe would soon join him, and this guy stuck around for the series for, well, a long bloody time following this, occasionally contributing as composer, so his musical footprint will be heard for quite a while after this game, for better or worse, which, sorry again, I will get into in the re-release section. Sonic 3's music, in my personal opinion, is a step up from Sonic 2's. More complex audio tracks were implemented, and like with Sonic 2, the tracks were very versatile and convey that of a whole orchestra at times with how grandiose the songs are. The music team really outdid themselves in that department. Not to mention that distinct, repetitive drum beat from the first two games was finally eliminated. You know, this sound? Totally gone, for the time being. My personal faves in the soundtrack are Carnival Night, Ice Cap, Launch Base, Lava Reef and Death Egg Zones, plus most of the competition mode songs. And I have vivid memories of vibing to the tracks on my Windows XP computer while working on projects. But there was one track I listened to the most, which caught my attention the moment I heard it, and persists in my brain as my favourite of the soundtrack. Yeah, it's the Sonic 3 Final Boss theme. so intense, uses the Mega Drive sound font to its fullest potential, became the unofficial theme of a fan favourite Mega Sonic, and just, it's so freaking good, are you kidding me? Head boppin'. Golly, I've really gone on for this long without talking about the graphics and how the game plays. To be frank, there's not many changes, but still. Time to talk about game feel. Oh, look at this swanky save file menu, another first for the series. In this menu, you get to pick which character you play as, be it Sonic, Tails, Sonic and Tails, or if you have the And Knuckles add-on, Red Rad himself. There's also a delete option in the form of Dr. Robotnik towards the right, which you can use to revert a save file into a blank one. Worth noting that as you progress through the game, the accompanying image above the character will correspond to the zone you last reached, and when you complete the campaign with that character, you can pretty much select any stage in the game to start from, all without the need of a hidden level select code, although the game still does feature one. I really enjoy the pixel art in Sonic 3, it's a visual upgrade in detail and really shows off the console's hardware features. It may be from having a different art director than the previous teams, in this case Kunitake Aoki, returning from Sonic 2. Their art direction intended to make the game have a more modern look to it, to contrast with the CGI early polygonal inspirations Oshima and Yamaguchi used. The level tile sets alone showcase just how much the graphical fidelity had evolved, there's so much more dynamic lighting and texture. Metallic surfaces have a blue tint on them, certain tile sets and level details have more intricate animation now, really good animation, and the forests and leaves have so much detail and depth that when the character progresses, the parallax scrolling effect really helps the environment feel organic. Oftentimes you'll see the colour palette shift between different colours, like in Lava Reef Act 2, or have the whole stage just bathed in a heatwave effect. This game is also the first to have Act 1 and Act 2 have distinct variants of the level's music track, and also a really nice touch how the end of Act 1 segues immediately to the map of Act 2. It's much cleaner than a fade to black. Also, the explosion effect, one of my favourites in the series to look at and hear. The original game had a lot of orange and smoke as the sound effects popped one after another. Sonic 2 had its meaty looking fiery explosions which looked very nice when layered over each other. Sonic 3s have less frames of animation and come and go pretty quick, but the sound effects are quick too and just very invigorating to hear. I love seeing things blow up in this game. The way mechs crumble and freaking collapse when destroyed, they're blown off pieces with a slight flickering effect. Don't clip me saying I like things blowing up. The zone title sequences were also changed up. It's like a mix of Sonic 1 and Sonic CDs in that it starts with a black background with white text and a red bookmark, and then have the background fade out, followed by the text flying off. It truly is the best of both worlds. Also, the visual effect of entering buildings by removing everything in the foreground once you enter, very neat if underused effect. It's brilliantly shown off in the first act of Angel Island Zone with the hollow tree, but I don't think it gets showcased again until, in 2 of the Eggman bases. Plenty of gameplay aspects are unchanged from Sonic 2. The speed cap was sadly limited, as no matter how fast you might run across these stages, there won't be many, speeding off camera moments. When playing with Sonic and Tails, the AI is still as entertaining as ever. The little buddy will always try and keep up with Sonic, and may end up tumbling into trouble, getting stuck on things and giving the impression that he's having a whale of a time, or in this instance where he single-handedly demolished the first boss. Tails. Rings still net you an extra life if you get 100 of them. Capsules, or prison eggs, still appear at the end of Act 2 stages, oftentimes in a floating variant to change things up. Springs provide a means to cross gaps and launch up slopes, although they are just as much a hindrance as they are helpful, which is often the case in these games. Oh, pissing blimey. Bumpers appear in Carnival Night Zone, the special stages, and Balloon Park, and air bubbles are also plentiful. They can appear on the ground like usual and from within popped balloons, and you'll be seeing them a lot, because golly is there a lot of underwater segments in this game.
Water and water and water, water, 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 water.
Angel Island was brought to the ocean, I suppose, so it narratively makes sense. Metal spikes reappear in nearly every sodding zone, and are an indication of this game's steeper difficulty compared to the other two. When placed side by side with their Sonic CD and Sonic 2 sprites, they are certainly thicker, and even more white than previously, adding to their hostile looks. When you see them, you don't want to be anywhere near them. As well as being jammed onto a couple of other hazards, such as crushers. What happened there? One of Dr. Robotnik's two zones also give the spikes a different appearance for aesthetic purposes. In Ice Cap Zone they look like sharpened icicles, and in Flying Battery Zone they are actually animated and can be pushed in certain spots. I'm surprised more games in this series don't change the appearance of these recurring obstacles. The gold plate at the end has updated art of the cast adorning its sides. Dr. Robotnik with his sparkly glasses, Sonic doing his peace sign, Tails looking at me judgmentally, and Knuckles with his fist out. They appear from the sky after the defeat of mini-bosses at the end of a zone's Act 1, and can be jumped at to keep swirling in the air for extra points, sometimes rarely landing on some extra goodies for you to collect. Item boxes return, housing rings, 1-ups, super shoes, invincibility, or a damaging Robotnik image, and have an updated design compared to Sonic 1 and 2. Instead of a square-shaped television, they resemble Macintosh computer sets, which helps set this game apart from the others even more. Has anyone actually seen a Macintosh Color Classic? They look exactly like the item boxes here. The invincibility music is different in both games, and shares the same theme of the super transformation, along with the extra lives. I'm nostalgic for Sonic 3's one, but I know each of them correspond to their different title themes. They're alright. Ooh, water? Thank God, I need a drink. Instead of typical shields, elemental ones make their debut in this game. Not only do these look really cool to have on and grant you an extra hit, but they serve extra gameplay purposes too. As well as allowing Sonic, and only Sonic sadly, extra mobility when you hit the jump button again, it allows the player character to be safe from enemy projectiles and protects you from hazards of that element for the most part. The fire shield is the most useful in that aspect, as most bosses now have a damaging rocket effect on some parts of them and can only be bypassed with a barrier of fire. It also allows Sonic to dash forward in a burst of speed, the camera barely able to keep up. The Thunder Shield, doubly useful in that not only does it grant Sonic an extra jump, but it gives the inherent ability to have rings automatically gravitate towards you if you're close enough. I'll just say, really satisfying to get these when you reach whole rooms full of the stuff, although watch out for water as it and the Fire Shield evaporate if you fall in. Ow, my eyes. The Water Shield is your best friend during underwater segments, letting the player character breathe underwater indefinitely, and letting Sonic do a bouncy maneuver where he immediately spin attacks into the ground. There's also an item box only available in debug mode, namely the S monitor, which gives the user 50 rings and an instant superform. Speaking of Sonic's movements, one new feature is Sonic's Insta Shield, which gives you an extra reach with your spin attack if you don't have a shield on. Good against heavily armed bosses or enemies. It pretty much gives you like a brief moment of invincibility frames. Tails has the ability to fly, a feature he lacked in Sonic 2's original release, and I find it useful for navigation or for reaching hidden areas full of rings. Unlike in Sonic 2 8-bit, you keep your momentum when popping into a jump, which I appreciate very much. Tails is also like an inch shorter than the others, so his hitbox is less likely to be punctured by some hazards, including jutting spikes. Knuckles can glide through the air and climb up walls with his spiky boxing gloves, giving him the means to explore further and allowing the levels much vertical depth in his own tougher routes. The only downside to playing as the red guy is that his jump doesn't reach quite as high, making wall climbing and gliding his main method of traversal and boss strategies. Okay, let's talk bonus stages. Star posts with a similar design to their Sonic 2 look now open the gateway to bonus stages if you have a significant amount of rings. This game uniquely has two flavours of them, but I'll go into the one you get power-ups from first. The colour of the star circles depend on the number of rings you have when you ring the star posts, which is only really used in the combined game. In the original Sonic 3, while sparkles appear if you have 50 or more rings, 50 to 72 rings in the full game, you'll get transported to the Gumball machine, where bouncing up and turning the crank allows a randomised reward of either rings, a 1-up, an empty ball, a bumper ball that's annoying but you can also use to get extra height too, a ball that returns the springs on the bottom, which is only in Sonic 3, and each of the elemental shields, letting you keep it when you leave and return to the platforming gameplay. In Sonic & Knuckles and the combined game, 2 more replaced that one or were included alongside it, depending on the version. And they are as follows. Having 20 to 34 rings will make the star ring yellow and leads to the slot machine stage, which harken back to the Sonic 1 special stages with a slot machine in the middle. Nothing much to know here, but if you get 50 rings from gambling, you get to continue. Risk it all or get fricking wrecked. Just like real gambling. The glowing sphere stage is signalled by the red star ring, available when you have 35 to 49 rings, and it is my least favourite. It's where you're chased by a laser beam and have to race to the top through these peculiar orbiting balls of light. They're a little tricky to get the hang of, but you can pick up some Gumball prizes on your way up. Usually when playing, I tend to avoid these bonus stages because they tend to break the pace of gameplay. But what I don't ignore are the special stages that contain the Chaos Emeralds. You want me to get Sonic's what? Instead of being found at the end of Act 2, giant rings are hidden away in stages, either behind veiled pathways or behind destroyable walls that can be spin dashed into, and you can find a bunch of them in every level if you're a sharp enough player. Their checkerboard planetoid design is certainly eye-catching, and was supposedly inspired by King Kai's planet from Dragon Ball, which, you know, I can kind of see that. These play much differently than usual. It's still a third-person perspective like in the half-pipe, but you move around on a grid collecting blue balls and rings, avoiding red ones like the plague because colliding with them will boot you from the stage. Wait, Knuckles, no! Don't get the red ones because you're red! Blue ones also become red when you run over them, and the aim is to run around the perimeter of these blue spheres to collect them and also turn them into rings, an additional pickup which only really net you a continue if you get enough of them. Other spheres you can encounter are bumper ones, which make you run backwards before you reorient yourself, and yellow ones, which spring you a good distance forward from where you're facing, though you can also jump over them if you don't want to get disorientated, the jump allowing you to leap over 2 spheres of distance. Trust me, crazy things can happen in these stages. I consider myself a pro at Sonic 3, but even I fumble here, and that might have to do with the speed up mechanic. Yeah, one element in this special stage in particular is that the music speeds up every few seconds, forcing you to run faster for taking so long. This can make it especially punishing if you aren't as familiar with these maps, and heaven help you if you're having to speed up during a tight situation. Thank God the HUD at the top tells you how many blue spears you need to collect. Like Sonic 1, these special stages are cycled through in order, so losing in one of the special stages and re-entering a giant ring will just take you to the next one on the list before it loops back around. In Sonic 3 there's also an 8th special stage, available only with a cheat code, and a 9th one in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Just thought I'd mention. Ooh, the Mustard Emerald. Additionally, there is also Blue Sphere. Alright, so if the Sonic and Knuckles combo cartridge had any game other than Sonic 2 or 3 jammed into it, it would load this Easter egg of a mode that's all special stages, and just special stages. Apart from the menu you use to pick the difficulty, it's essentially an endless mode. There's not any rewards out of it unless you're just a big fan of this style of Special Zone, and it's... how many layouts are there? That's so many maps, it can go on forever. Who would do that? The Mad Lads. Getting to the end of a Special Zone after grabbing all of the blue spears nets you a Chaos Emerald. They're designed consistent to the previous titles in that they are Asher-cut gemstones, but their colours here have been finalised as red, green, blue, turquoise, purple, yellow and white. Collecting all of them allows Sonic to become Super Sonic in regular gameplay and unlock the good ending. The same for Knuckles, giving him a glowy pink coloration. But not poor Tails, at first. Lore-wise, people don't often bring up the Super Emeralds, enhanced forms of each of the Chaos Emeralds thanks to the Master Emerald, each getting their own spot in the altar. They certainly resemble the brilliant cut diamonds the Chaos Emeralds would take on later on, but are otherwise their own brand of collectible with their own special stages, the ones from Sonic and Knuckles to be exact. They also come with their own super transformation. Holy frick, the Hyper State. The seizure-inducing rainbow form, even more powerful than the Super State, and only appearing in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Probably for the best, the power scaling would be a right mess. Only available for Sonic and Knuckles, maintaining this form relies on collecting rings, which drain like they would when you're Super, and along with the usual perks, Hyper Sonic can do a double jump and also whites out the screen, damaging any nearby enemies, and Knuckles can slam his fist into a wall while gliding to make the whole screen shake, destroying all badniks on screen. Young Tails attains a super form when getting the Super Emeralds, though it's occasionally called Hyper Tails, and he's just as badass with his flicky army of death. They go after badniks and bosses alike, nearly trivializing certain sections, but it's quite a pleasant reward for going out of your way to collect them all. Lastly, I suppose I'll go into the often overlooked competition mode. I don't think I used this very often back in the day except when racing my cousin or mucking about with my sister to see who can get the slowdown shoes power up or the remote bomb on the item wheel. I mostly remember it for its chibi-fied player sprites. Look at these little guys! An entirely optional mode, harkening back to the 2-player mode from Sonic 2, it contains 5 original stages as super short obstacle courses. Azure Lake, a beautifully pristine area with richly detailed mountains, Balloon Park, a Carnival Night Zone lookalike with animals in the decal, Chrome Gadget, a tricky course in an energy power plant, Desert Palace, a dusty highway with quicksand, and Endless Mine, a green and purple abandoned cavern with the most relaxing, melancholy track you'll ever hear. It's personally one of my favourites, and back when I was a kid I would do time attack mode just to listen to it. As well as beating your own time, you can also race with another player in any of the courses, or pick Grand Prix to do all of them in order, and you can toggle between power-ups being available or not. You know, seeing these guys all chibi makes me really want to talk about them in this video's game. Let's do that. If you've played Sonic 2, you'll know that most of the band of dudes are at their usual posts. You got Sonic and Tails as some of the playable characters, with their rolling into a ball antics, and look at Sonic's sprites, he's got quite a different look this time. Compared to the previous game, his sprites look a little more refined, mature. His general posture has been reworked, and he's got a little smile instead of his mouth being stylized to be hidden from view. And his hurt and death sprites are also different. Perhaps not as iconic as the originals, but I just thought they were worth mentioning. He's also got different animations for being on the edge of platforms, which are always nice to see. And in his idle sprite, he no longer sits on the ground and scowls at you for standing still for too long. Instead, he points at you and then encourages you to get going already. Though sprites of him nodding off do exist in the game's files. Also worth mentioning that the drop dash, which would first appear in Sonic Mania, was conceptualized during production of Sonic 3, but would be cut and replaced with the Insta-Shield, though Mecha Sonic does seem to possess a move similar to that now that I look at him. Tails' sprites are relatively unchanged except for the shading being a tad softer and his head being redesigned to be more in line with his character art. The flying animation when underwater also shows him dog paddling, which is honestly adorable. Nice fighting pose, bud. Knuckles is a new addition to the cast, and while a rival in the first half of the game's existence, he was promoted to playable character by the time of Sonic & Knuckles' release. While Sonic symbolises speed, Knuckles is all about raw power, and his design is all about emphasising how well he can fight and break down walls with ease, either with a punch or with his massive freaking forehead. Not much else I can say about his design, though as an NPC he had to wear yellow socks instead of green ones because the limited colour palette would have messed with the game's HUD. Dr. Robotnik is the instigator of the plot, and he is felt even after he leaves the story thanks to his robot forces. While his role as an end-of-zone boss is untouched, his villainy and capacity to build like a bajillion mechs are at their most deadly here, and he occasionally makes appearances outside of his machines, usually to control some lethal apparatus against the heroes. Yeah, nice job firing holes in your own ship, you Neanderthal. Also, I know some peeps question why I keep calling him Dr. Robotnik instead of his original and more official name Eggman, and there's two simple reasons for that. It's the name he was given when I was a young Westerner, so of course I correlate this design of him to that specific name. And two, it's just out of habit that I call his classic form this name and his modern self Dr. Eggman. I mean, they made a joke about it in Sonic Generations, so it's semi-canon anyway, but I just felt it was something I felt needed clarifying. His sprites are relatively unchanged from Sonic 2, which along with Tails might be due to rushed production, but his Eggmobile is certainly different. It's more comparable to the one from Sonic 1, but more simplistic, with no wings or windshield, and with 2 exhaust pipes and occasionally a glass dome for protection. The game's content itself is bigger, so of course Dr. Robotnik's mechs have to be bigger. I love the design of these things, from the Egg Scorcher Mark III, the Egg Rocket, the giant Eggman Robo and final weapon in the last stretch of the game. They are tricky to fight, but golly do they look brilliant as improvements over the Death Egg Robot's design. I mean, look at this Goliath of a mecha. Also, similar to Sonic 2 back in the day, where most of the bosses had just Eggman at the end, in the manuals, since most of the bosses were occupied by Eggman's Eggmobile, they had Mobile at the end of their name. So, you know, Screwmobile, Flamemobile, Freezermobile. It was like this for most of them, until Sonic Origins and the Encyclopedia gave them names with Egg at the beginning to coincide with how he names them in every other game. Gotta keep them consistent, you know? And speaking of mechas, Mecha Sonic first appeared in this game, or rather the Mecha Sonic Mark II model. Fans picked up quickly on his sleek design and combat capabilities, which made him fun to fight, even when he reuses some of his creator's methods of eliminating Sonic. You'll never see Metal Sonic do something like that, unless he's disguised as him. He's got such a good design though. I've seen peeps all over the net unite in praising this guy's badassery, either in sprite comics, fan animations, and 3D recreations. The fact that Mecha Sonic was the first to get a super state when using the Master Emerald opened up a whole lot of possibilities for fan ideas during school discussions in the early years of the internet. I tell you, there's nothing that brings Sonic fans together than badass character moments. Also, like the previous model, he possesses one eye, and that eye is also the thing that goes down to his chest when he's in his powering up animation. It's an often overlooked design idea, though I did see it get noted in IDW concept art. Read the accompanying comic to find out where Mega Sonic ended up. By the by, I do want to make a retrospective on IDW Sonic, not yet anyway, but go check out the Scrapnik Island miniseries at the very least. It is well worth your time, and it's hauntingly brilliant. Animals reappear as the power source of Badniks and the prisoners of capsules at the end, and consist of some of the same species from Sonic 2. They appear in ending cutscenes, and red ones appear in Knuckles' campaign because of palette limitations. Tails has blue flickies that act as extensions of his powered-up form, which power down and flee when that runs out, and they get harassed by egg robos in Sky Sanctuary Zone. Speaking of Badniks, they appear by the truckload and are different in every zone, some of them only appearing in Acts 2 of a level to change things up. Their designs are my favourite for the classic era, being outwardly clunky looking and vaguely resembling the wildlife they are based on, and frequently possessing unnaturally large eyeballs. Badniks are certainly more threatening to players here, being designed to trip up the heroes by disguising as spikes, sometimes having more aggressive attack patterns, being innocent at first before revealing their intentions, or just being really quick on the draw like the egg robos. As well as regular enemies, Act 1 of every zone now has a sub-boss fought in between platforming segments. While their attack patterns are simple and they don't typically have discernible faces, certain ones can keep you on your toes. For the remainder of this section, I shall go into each of the enemies and mini-bosses in this game, and I'll be calling the big ones Super Badniks because call it a force of habit as a post-reboot Archie Sonic enjoyer. Monkey Dudes are a variant of the Coconuts Badnik, which climb trees with their hands and tail. They toss a coconut projectile and do nothing but vibe after. Rhinobots charge back and forth, but can do a U-turn and come back for more if they miss. Bluminators look like tulips and periodically spit out two spiky balls that go in an arc. Fire Breath is a mass-produced flying thing that is capable of dropping missiles or using flamethrowers. Super easy if you have a fire shield. Caterpillar Juniors are a variant of that segmented Badnik which float through the air back and forth. Anywhere else but their head will damage you. Point Dexters swim about in set locations and can puff themselves up every few seconds with protective spikes. Mega Chopper, despite the name, are a smaller version of the Chop Chop Badnik. They can latch onto you from both below or above water to sap away your rings and hinder your movement, requiring them to be shaken off to be free. Blastoids are a mobile turret that shoot a string of projectiles straight upward. Destroying one usually reveals the way forward. Buggernauts come in two. Like wisps, they will slowly fly towards you and do collision damage. The little follower cannot be destroyed and simply flees when the bigger one is defeated. Turbo Spikers are an upgrade of the Sonic 2 Badnik which have tank treads, allowing them to flee after launching their shell. They are a little annoying to deal with. A Big Shaker is a mecha in red armour that has rockets orbiting around it, and it uses a mechanism that can create distracting whirlpools. Jaws, with a Z, are basically the equivalent of bullet bills. They slowly fly forward in large groups, self-destructing if they touch you. Bubbles is the name of a blue Badnik which breezes about in a set pattern, occasionally retracting or releasing a spiny defense. Speaking of spikes, Spikers disguise themselves as a bed of spikes, but have a slight metallic sheen that gives them away. They will repeatedly launch little projectiles if you're close. Tunnel bots are mass-produced drillers which will cause a ruckus when making holes in the landscape, making debris and spikes rain down on the arena. Mantises often hop out of the grass to pester you, but otherwise simply hop on the spot. Reliefs aren't Badniks, but they are a common obstacle in Marble Garden Zone. They are seemingly a defense mechanism from a previous civilization and need to be hit on their freaking forehead to proceed. Clammers hide in protective shells and fire spiny balls from a concealed cannon. Jumping on them launches you diagonally upward as if it were a spring. Batbots are initially stationary until you approach, where they will slowly flap towards you. They have a light bulb on their underside, but it's non-lethal. A bowling spin fights in an arena with destructible blocks, which it takes advantage of with its spinning top. When the player character hits it, it leaves itself open to be struck by its own weapon. Sparkles look like grenades which flip from the ceiling to floor, releasing harmful sparks in the process. Star Pointers are an icy Orbinaut variant which slowly send forward their spiny balls as they move forward. Penguinators waddle around and can slide on their bellies to attack, turning around and trying again if they miss. Big Istus being the Japanese name for the Star Pointer Badnik, is a mecha which makes a shield out of ice chunks, which it also tosses down at you. Flybot 767, an airplane homage apparently, appear mainly after you run through alarm systems. They try to dive bomb you. Speaking of Orbinaut, regular ones appear as enemies in the next zone. They move towards you whenever you make any movement. Being in the air doesn't count. Ribots, nice pun there, are stationary Badniks with harmful weights which they either swing back and forth or around them in a circle. Snail blasters slowly inch up and down walls. Their shells protect them from harm but are vulnerable when they fire their 2 projectiles. Corkies are essentially laser cannons which move along tracks, firing a lethal beam straight down. Twin hammers are found inside containers and can, like their name implies, swing their pairs of spiked arms around. Oh, my voice is going weird. Don't forget to hydrate. Botter droids are basically patter-batter badniks that float close enough to collide with the player character. They always appear in pairs or groups of 3. Dragonflies have spiked tails and they float up and down to block your progress. Their heads are their weak point. Mad moles appear out of a hole and toss a mushroom at 2 different trajectories, launching you along with it if it happens to bump into you. Also, one of them pilots the flying battery blimp. Mush meanies disguise themselves as hopping mushrooms, requiring 2 hits to defeat them as the first one only knocks their cap off. Hey-Ho is a lumberjack looking guy who uses its axe to chop off harmful log pieces. It also uses its body and disembodied head if it reaches the bottom. Clockoids are weathercocks which can blow air at you to push you back. I can probably make something out of that. Blaster, not to be confused with Blastoid, are capable of rolling along the ground and firing projectiles in an arc. Techno squeaks, computer mice that scutter back and forth either on the ground or on walls and ceilings. Gapsule is the name of this fake prison egg that is completely invincible, although it can be tempted to wallop itself with its own spiky flails. The laser prison isn't a badnik or anything, but a callback to the Wing Fortress boss in Sonic 2. It eventually shuts off when the arena is small enough. Scorps roll back and forth on the spot and can send out their tail with a spiky mace on the end. They either have super accurate aim or not at all. Sandworms are another Caterpillar variant, and they burrow through quicksand, leaping out in an arc motion every now and then. Rocken is a type of badnik that hides in sand blocks. They can be ridden on or just destroyed after being activated. The Guardian isn't even a robot, but I felt it's worth mentioning as an interesting puzzle boss. It's a stone golem that blocks the way forward. Its only weak point is the head, and it's invulnerable everywhere else, and it must be hit or lured into the quicksand. Hyudoro is the name of the ghosties that inhabit the dark tombs of the pyramid. They can only be temporarily sent away whenever light switches are pulled. Fireworms appear from behind walls, and like the Caterpillar Junior badniks, only their heads can be struck or else you'll get hurt. Toxomister, or is it Toxomister? They are poles with an eye on the top that produce a cloud of gas. It will slow down your movement and slowly drain away your rings until you destroy the source. The Rock Drill is the name given to these robots that appear during certain set pieces, which make the ground fall away underneath you and or itself. Fake rocks, or Iwamodokis, are badniks disguised as rocks that reveal themselves and then blow up into harmful chunks. They cannot be struck, only stepped on as platforms. The heat arms are a pair of antennae which fire projectiles at you, and a giant hand which reaches out to try and flatten you. The hand kind of resembles the giant Eggman robos now that I think about it. Egg robos, yeah, all one word, are like elite badniks which fly through the air and shoot a laser beam. They are astute enough to pilot mechas from the looks of things. Spike bonkers try to bonk you with their orbiting spike balls. They guard the inner parts of the def egg. Chain spikes like to zip back and forth at fast speeds, stopping to try and puncture you with one of its extendable spikes. Red Eye sits itself within a metallic column, guarding itself with spike balls that can explode into spikes. During its second phase, it breaks free and tries to fry you with an alarm-triggering laser beam. And lastly, the Death Ball, a remote-controlled robot that protects itself with shields and can only be destroyed by the mine tanks it produces. So with just about everything discussed involving this version of the game, let's close this off with talking about the ported versions, comics, and the legacy among the fandom. We like comic books here, right? MIDI jump scare. That's the first Sonic track Baby Me ever heard, ironically. The Sonic & Knuckles collection for PC wasn't too bad. It was basically the same as the Mega Drive version, barring the music format, and a couple of other quirks due to it being a Windows port. I distinctly remember putting it in windowed mode, and it increased the speed by times 200. I believe it was due to the CPU speed. It was also notable for including Sonic the Hedgehog the screensaver, which would be a little loud with its game sound effects and compressed audio, but it was always enjoyable seeing the characters slowly cross the screen. I love the Sonic sprites they used in particular. Other ports that were considerably cleaner were on Sonic Jam for the Sega Saturn, Sonic Mega Collection, Sonic Classics Collection for the Nintendo DS, and more. It would be over a decade until an updated port would be made. Christian Whitehead, the dude who championed the remastered iOS ports for Sonic CD, Sonic 1 and then Sonic 2, would make a proof of concept, but Sega would refuse to have it made for reasons. Then, in 2022, Sonic Origins would come out, and a whole new generation would get to experience the game in all its glory. Like other games in the collection, optional missions would be added, cheats where you could use unique item boxes and make every enemy a penguinator, new blue spheres, which added teleporting warp spheres, and green double spheres into the mix. Holy crap, I can't deal. Animated cutscenes, and the drop dash ability would be added. And in Sonic Origins Plus, Amy Rose will be playable in this game. She's even got an option to have Tails follow her around. That's cute. I realise I haven't even touched upon her moveset yet, so for a quick explanation, she plays very much like Sonic, but with Tails' hitbox, and the drop dash is pretty much included into her moveset, where when you hold the jump button again, she does a little charge once she lands on the ground with her hammer. Good for knocking down stuff, and bouncing on enemies really well. Super and Hyper Amy is also possible, once again being the first time a female character has gotten such a transformation, well it isn't with the Soul Emeralds anyway. Although curiously the super form isn't named, the same with Tails in this version, with the Super Emeralds giving her a super form instead. In this form she could throw multiple hammers! I swear it's a reference to Sonic the Fighters with one of her moves from there. I'm just really happy to see her here. Also, I wasn't sure how to segue to this, but competition mode is back. Everything's no longer chibi, so they had to redo every single sprite and background asset to make them normal sized. A pretty grand effort for a game mode that not many fans would play. I would be here forever if I mentioned all of the sprite touch-ups and stuff, but for now I'll simply say it's a much more refined experience with both unused and new little features that help make this the definitive version. Not to mention the widescreen support. This makes seeing hazards much more viable and also helps navigate the blue sphere stages with the wider view of the map. For the music, certain tracks were replaced with their beta ones. They were redone using the Mega Drive sound font by June, who also composed the new Super Transformation theme, and while it's a neat, if short, tune, the remixed beta themes, however, I don't like them. I'm not even saying that as a die-hard fan of the old tracks, because I heard these during my first experience with the game on the Compooper, and I never felt they sounded out of place among the other level themes thanks to the MIDI format keeping it consistent. The beta ones here sound bad. They're not as integrated well, and don't sound as complex as the rest of the soundtrack. Do I think the tracks were lazily written? I wouldn't say that. You'd have to physically try to do a poor composing job in these games. I suppose the attempt is more misguided than anything. The team behind this version were also sadly put under strict deadlines to get it all done despite the bugs, in a cruel, ironic case of repeated history. But in the end, I say they did a good job with what they were given. Hats off to you, headcanon. Video games weren't the only medium Sonic 3 and Sonic & Knuckles could be digested by fans. Notably, Archie Sonic comics would make a couple adaptations back in the day. The events of Sonic 3 would be loosely covered in issue number 13, and Sonic & Knuckles had its own one-off. I actually did videos of these two a couple of years ago. If I don't watch them, they're bad. Despite my distaste for some of the stuff, I have a soft spot for these old issues. This era of the comics was so unserious, so full of slapstick and dad joke vibes that it's almost endearing. I like how the flying battery blimp looks like an actual aircraft in one panel, but on the next page it looks like Bender Futurama's head.
Come on, Bender, let's mosey.
Quick, press buttons so Sonic doesn't die in the comic book. Thanks to fan complaints, there would later be the game-accurate Death Egg 3-parter series, known as Sonic Quest, detailing Angel Island being struck and involving Knuckles and the Chaotix, though in the Death Egg itself it was more like the finale of Sonic 2. Silver Sonic would make an appearance, and instead of a Death Egg robot, the big bad would put on the exoskeleton, and physically tussle with the Hedgehog himself using the mecha as a suit. Complex, but ultimately unserious. There was also planned an adaptation of the late part of the story in issue number 291, which we don't know too much about because the comic suddenly ended production, but judging by the early art, it would have covered the Sonic & Knuckles showdown and the Sky Sanctuary segment with Mecha Sonic. Why do they make the Death Egg look so tiny here? That thing is meant to be big. Big. Sonic the Comic would also have Dr. Robotnik of that continuity unleash his second Death Egg in an arc covering most of the full game. While I'm not an avid Fleetway Sonic fan, despite it being published in the UK, I'm always interested in just how off-the-wall eccentric their stories and characters are, and I appreciate some good art and intricate detail despite the short number of pages. One time they did accidentally misinterpret Badnik art from the manual because that's just the most they had to go by at the time. The Death Egg was drawn with almost loving detail. The artists always knew how to draw and shade metallic threats, as laughably corny as they were written. In terms of ROM hacks and fan games, you bet they've been made by the shitload considering how long this game took to be updated to modern hardware. You have the usual character sprite replacements, altering of the game's levels or new ones made, or the fans' own re-release of Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic 3 Air. It stands for Angel Island Revisited, and it is available as long as you have a compatible Sonic 3 and Knuckles ROM, like on Steam. It's very easy to set up, and I'll put a link in the description also. The amount of customization to tailor your own experience is huge. It's incredible, and it's also mod compatible, including the one that replaces Egg Robo in Knuckles' campaign with Agent Stone of the Sonic movie series. Golly, that was a wild time. Remember when Dr. Robotnik's loyal lackey in the movies was given fan designs by artists to fit more with the classic Sonic aesthetic, and everyone just vibed with it, including the actor? Man, when the fandom puts their creative heads together, they make amazing stuff. As one of the best-selling Mega Drive games of all time, I think it's fair to say that Sonic the Hedgehog 3 has aged really well. The sense of adventure from triumphantly journeying from one zone to the next and taking on giant mechs in a more jam-packed story, for most fans is indescribably captivating as a full package. For critics, it proved above all else that you can teach an old hedgehog new and exciting tricks, even if some felt it didn't innovate quite as much as promised, but that's a fair minority in the critique of this game. In my experience, the game fine-tunes the original platforming and makes the gameplay immersive. The added lore is very interesting to the point it still gets callbacks today as recurring game locations, and altogether makes for a very satisfying playthrough for fans in all walks of life. Very few games in this series would even reach its level of universal acclaim, and to me, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is classic Sonic at its peak. Oh, I want to add it to the tier list, but the S rank is already the highest I can give it. If only there was a way to add... Hail to the king. Thank you ever so much for watching, if indeed you still are, and I'll see you in the next video.